At 6:03 on a snowy December morning, my son called and said, "Dad, it's better if you stay home this Christmas. The Aspen trip is just for our little family." I stared at the hotel reservations, ski passes, and gifts I'd spent nearly $70,000 on. An hour later, I made my way to his house, wanting the truth face to face. But I saw my son, my daughter-in-law, and her family leaving in two luxury SUVs for the vacation I paid for. When they vanished into the snow, I noticed an upstairs window open. I climbed inside, and what I found hidden there sent a chill down my spine. Thank you for being here with me. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me what the weather is like where you are right now. Your perspective means a lot. Just a heads up, this story includes some fictional elements to deepen the lesson, but the heart of it, the message, is what I hope resonates with you. My phone buzzed at 6 in the morning, and for a split second my body thought I'd overslept for work. Old habits die harder than the people who built them. I'd been awake since 4. Gordon Harrington, 72 years old, with silver hair and the steady hands of a man who spent 3 decades as an aerospace chief engineer, standing in my dim Lakewood kitchen at 4820 Quail Ridge Drive, the only warm corner in a house that had grown too large for one person, the coffee brewed using 30-year muscle memory, the kind that doesn't require conscious thought anymore. Pour water, measure grounds, press start, wait. Frances Harrington's photograph sat by the window where morning light caught her smile, frozen 2 years before. Cancer took her voice, my wife of 31 years, who would have seen through this betrayal long before I did. I looked at the empty chair across from me, the one she'd occupied every morning until pancreatic cancer decided our breakfast conversations were finished. The kitchen still smelled like her coffee, but the scent had become routine rather than warmth. On the counter sat 3 wrapped gifts: technical Lego architecture set, aviation history book covering the SR-71 Blackbird program, purple wool scarf that Frances had custom ordered 8 months before she died, knowing she wouldn't be here for Christmas, but determined that our granddaughter would have something beautiful anyway. All for Ivy Harrington, my 9-year-old granddaughter who loved aviation history and technical puzzles. The only person in 3 generations who still looked at me like I had something worth hearing. $67,000. That's what the Aspen trip cost. Chartered van service luxury, slopeside accommodations, 5-star dining reservations, private ski instruction for Ivy. Not because I'm wealthy, because some things can't be bought with money, and I'm trying anyway. 2 years of empty kitchen mornings had taught me that grief is a pressure system, and the only way to relieve it is to create moments worth remembering with the people still breathing. I poured my second cup at 6:02 a.m., watching December snow. Fall outside the window, thinking about how Ivy's face would light up when she saw actual mountains instead of the flat Colorado prairie around Lakewood. Then my phone buzzed. Sterling Harrington's name flashed across the screen, my 34-year-old son, who had somehow learned to deliver devastating news through digital distance rather than looking his father in the eye. I set the coffee down and opened the message. Plans changed. Catalina thinks this trip should just be for our core little family to heal our marriage. More comfortable for you to stay home where it's warm. We'll send pictures. I read it 3 times, not from confusion, from the same engineering discipline that had defined my entire career. When a system fails, you don't react emotionally. You identify root cause. And the root cause was immediately visible in the syntax. Catalina thinks meant Sterling hadn't thought this. Core little family was Catalina's phrasing, not my son's. More comfortable for you was the kind of false consideration that insults the intelligence of its target. In 35 years of aerospace engineering, I learned that the language of a document reveals its true author before I learned anything else. The phone sat there on the wooden table. I stared at it the way I used to stare at failed pressure tests, knowing the rupture had already happened, just waiting to measure the damage. $67,000. 72 hours of planning, gifts wrapped and waiting, hotel confirmations printed and organized in a folder by date, and 1 text message sent at 6:03 a.m. on December 22nd, 2024, telling me I wasn't family. I took a screenshot. Old habit. Document the failure mode. Then I forwarded the image to my personal email with the subject line, December 22nd, Sterling exclusion message. Engineers don't hope the data survives, they make sure it does. I stood up and walked to the coat closet, pulled out Frances's gray knitted sweater, the one she'd finished 2 months before the diagnosis. It still carried the faint scent of her lavender hand lotion. I slid it over my shirt and felt the weight settle across my shoulders like her hand used to rest there when we stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes together. I need a cab, I said into my phone, pulling up the dispatch app. Corner of South Vine and Cherry Creek Drive. Yes, now. The operator asked if I wanted to schedule for later, given the snow. Now, I repeated. If you've ever been told you're not family by the person you raised, you know that silence has a specific weight. It sits on your chest like frozen steel. But I didn't collapse. I didn't call Sterling back, demanding explanation. I didn't stare at Frances's photograph, asking what I should do. I calculated 34 years of raising a son, $67,000 allocated for family reconciliation, one daughter-in-law whose syntax dominated my son's voice, one text message sent at dawn timed to arrive after I'd be awake, but before I could reasonably drive to Cherry Creek to object in person. Someone had calculated that I would sit quietly at home, maybe call once, maybe send a hurt text message, but ultimately accept the exclusion with the quiet dignity of a man who'd already lost his wife and couldn't afford to lose his son too. The taxi pulled up 14 minutes later, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn snow. I grabbed my coat, left the wrapped gifts on the counter where they'd sit untouched, and walked out into the December cold without locking the door behind me. The house had nothing worth stealing anymore. In the back seat, I gave the driver the Cherry Creek address and watched the streetlights blur past through frosted windows. My phone buzzed twice, probably. Sterling, possibly Catalina, maybe even Ivy asking where Grandpa was. I didn't check. Engineers prioritize data collection over emotional response, and right now I needed to see what core little family actually meant before I decided what calculations to run next. The cab turned onto South Vine Street tires, crunching through fresh snow and through the falling white. I spotted them 2 black Escalades idling at the curb outside Sterling's house, exhaust rising like steam signals in the frozen air. And I instantly understood that core little family didn't mean what I thought. The taxi dropped me at South Vine Street at 7:15, and I spotted the 2 black Escalades before I spotted my son, white exhaust plumes billowing into December air, like smoke signals announcing a departure I was never meant to witness. 7 people, not a small intimate family unit. 7 people loading luxury SUVs while snow fell across Cherry Creek's manicured lawns. Vernon Langley, 58, directed the luggage operation like a theater director. He owned Langley Realty Denver and carried himself with the commanding presence of someone who believed every situation was a transaction he could control. He pointed at ski bags, gestured at trunk space, barked instructions. Colleen Langley, 55, stood wrapped in fur, reviewing a checklist on her phone. She looked up once saw me stepping from the cab, and her expression didn't change, like I was a yard ornament she'd already factored into the landscaping. Rhett Langley, 33, lounged in the back seat with headphones on and feet propped against the driver's seat. He'd spent his adult life treating other people's money as his personal expense account, without ever asking where it came from. Catalina Harrington, 30 years old, in a designer ski jacket that cost more than most people's monthly rent, supervised the loading with the calculated efficiency of a high-end Denver real estate broker, accustomed to closing deals on her terms. She moved between vehicles, checking tags, organizing bags, never once looking my direction. And Sterling Harrington, my 34-year-old son, with a polo shirt, already wrinkled at 7 in the morning, and eyes that darted like a teenager caught sneaking out, stood by the first Escalade holding Ivy's purple suitcase. He spotted me and flinched, actually flinched. Then his face reset into something cold and flat. I walked across the street. Snow crunched under my boots. Colleen rolled down her window before I reached the driveway. "Oh, Gordon," she said, smiling. "Elderly joints don't do well in mountain cold. If you slip and fall up there, the kids will have to spend the whole trip nursing you. It's truly best you watch the house." I looked at Sterling. He looked at the ground. 7 people. 2 luxury SUVs. $67,000 of my money, funding a vacation I was too fragile to join. When did exclusion start wearing the mask of concern? I didn't respond to Colleen. Instead, I walked to the back of the nearest Escalade where Vernon was hoisting the last bag into the trunk. And I saw it. The luggage tags. Every single one read, "The Langley family" in printed letters. Langley, not Harrington, not even a hyphenated compromise. My name was nowhere near this trip I'd paid for planned, for hoped would rebuild something broken. Vernon closed the trunk with a decisive thunk. "Safe travels," I said quietly. He looked at me for the first time. "We'll send pictures," he said like that was generous. The Escalades pulled away at 7:32 a.m. I stood in the street watching taillights disappear into falling snow. Within 90 seconds, fresh powder had filled their tire tracks, completely, like they'd never been there at all. I should have called a cab. Should have gone home to my empty kitchen and sat with the wrapped gifts I'd never give to Ivy now. Should have let the exclusion settle into my chest the way grief had settled there when Francis died, permanent, heavy, unchangeable. But engineers don't retreat without understanding failure mode. I walked the perimeter of Sterling's house instead. Snow was already 6 inches deep. I moved along the north wall, checking windows, looking for something. Evidence. Explanation. The laundry room window was open, not wide, maybe 2 inches. Just enough that I could see the white frame and smell cold air flowing through the gap. I stopped and stared. The latch was stuck. I could see it from here. The plastic casing had contracted in the Denver freeze, and the mechanism wouldn't seat properly. It was a flaw I'd noticed 3 years ago during a winter visit. I'd told Sterling to replace it before the plastic became brittle and snapped. Sterling never did. This is the boundary line, I thought. An injured old man goes home to lick his wounds, or a systems engineer investigates a failing mechanism. I heard Francis's voice so clearly I actually turned around. No one was there, just snow and white-capped pines and the silent street. But I heard her anyway. Gordon, don't step inside unless you're prepared to look at the unvarnished truth. I stood there for 10 seconds, maybe 20. The snow fell on my shoulders and melted into Francis's gray sweater, and I thought about all the times I'd chosen to look away from things that didn't make sense. Catalina's expensive tastes on a broker's commission, Sterling's vague answers about finances, the way Vernon always seemed to be consulting with my son about decisions I was never part of. I slid the window up. It moved easily, too easily, because the frame was warped and the seal was shot. I gripped the sill, pulled myself up, and slipped through into the laundry room. The air inside was freezing, dead silent except for the refrigerator hum somewhere deeper in the house, and the faint scent of Catalina's expensive perfume, lingering like a warning flag I should have seen years ago. I stood in the empty kitchen and surveyed the space like an engineer stepping into a cockpit after an accident report. The marble countertops were spotless. The stainless appliances gleamed. Everything looked perfect, controlled, exactly as it should be. But something in this house was profoundly misaligned. I didn't know what it was yet. But in 35 years of aerospace engineering, I had never encountered a system failure without eventually locating the root cause. And I had just been handed 7 hours of uninterrupted time to conduct a complete diagnostic. The first piece of evidence was waiting for me in Sterling's office down the hall, completely uncovered, sitting right there on his desk, as if its owner was too arrogant to believe anyone would ever look. From the kitchen, I walked straight towards Sterling's office. No rifling through drawers, no forcing locks, because an engineer reads a room like a schematic. The critical path component is usually left closest to the user's hand, and the yellow FedEx envelope sitting directly on the desk, completely uncovered, told me everything I needed to know about arrogance. The office was cluttered. Papers covered the desk next to a half-drunk cup of cold coffee. Ski brochures, printed emails, a credit card statement face down. But the yellow packet sat prominently on top of everything else, as if its owner was too arrogant to believe anyone would look. The label read, "Petition for Conservatorship, Denver County District Court." Below it, printed in bold, Respondent Gordon Harrington. I stood there for 3 seconds, maybe 5. Then I opened it. The petition requested that Denver County Court appoint Catalina Harrington as sole conservator of my estate. The stated grounds: early onset cognitive decline and paranoid ideation requiring immediate intervention to prevent irreversible financial harm. I turned the page. Page 2 listed my alleged symptoms: memory lapses, inability to manage basic finances, sudden irrational expenditures. The Aspen trip was cited as evidence of impulsive spending, inconsistent with historical financial discipline. Page 3 was a medical certification. Meridian Wellness Center, Aurora, Colorado, dated December 18th, 2024. Signed by a Dr. Marcus Holland, licensed clinical psychologist, certifying that I exhibited moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early dementia. Following a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, I have never stepped foot inside the Meridian Wellness Center. I have never met Dr. Marcus Holland. I have never undergone a neuropsychological evaluation in my entire life. I turned to the final page. There was a signature above the line for Gordon Harrington. I stared at it. In 35 years, I have signed thousands of engineering validations, inspection reports, quality certifications. I know my signature like I know my own hands. The angle of the G, the loop of the second R, the way the final N trails slightly upward. This signature had the wrong stroke weight, the wrong curvature, the wrong pressure distribution. This was a forgery. This wasn't a family argument anymore. It was a highly organized, systematic legal assault designed to strip me of every right I'd spent 60 years building. I pulled out my phone, set it to camera mode, and photographed every single page, front to back, methodically, sequentially. The petition, the grounds, the fraudulent medical certification, the forged signature. 12 pages total. Then I placed the file back exactly as I'd found it. Same position, same angle, same coffee ring partially obscuring the bottom corner. My hands were shaking, not from cold, from the weight of what I'd just discovered. I walked out of the office and sat down on the living room sofa. The leather was cold. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of a wall clock I'd given Sterling when he bought this place. I needed to regulate my breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way Francis used to tell me to do when I came home from work, with my jaw clenched, after a failed pressure test. My left hand brushed against the pocket of the gray sweater. I felt something rigid inside. I'd never worn this sweater until today. Every time I'd picked it up over the last 2 years, I'd set it back down, unable to wear it, without feeling the phantom touch of Francis's fingers, knitting the yarn. She'd finished it 2 months before the diagnosis, before the cancer announced itself, before everything changed. I reached deep into the left pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper folded into quarters. The ink was slightly faded. The handwriting was Francis's distinctive, precise, the same script she'd used to label every folder in our filing cabinet for 31 years. I unfolded it. Gordon, if you are reading this, it means you finally need it. I watched Catalina look at you like a bank account from the day of the wedding. You didn't see it because you refused to look. Do not let your love for Sterling blind you to the truth of the woman next to him. I love you. H. I sat in absolute silence for 5 minutes. If you've ever held a note from someone who saw the truth, you were too loyal to see. You know that grief and gratitude can occupy the exact same breath. She knew. Francis knew from the wedding day 7 years ago when Sterling married Catalina in that overpriced Cherry Creek venue with the ice sculpture and the 7-tier cake and the guest list that was 90% Langley relatives. I'd written the check and smiled through the reception and told myself that Sterling had found someone ambitious and driven. Francis had seen something else entirely, and she'd tried to warn me. Even when her body no longer had the strength to speak the words aloud, she'd hidden this note in the sweater she was knitting, somehow knowing that I would eventually need it. I folded the paper back along the original creases, carefully, precisely, the way an engineer handles critical documentation. Then I slid it into my breast pocket, the one closest to my heart. She'd seen the design flaw. Now it was my turn to fix it. I stood up and looked around the living room, the gas fireplace that had never been lit, the leather furniture that looked expensive but felt cold, the abstract art on the walls that Catalina had chosen, and Sterling had paid for without asking the price. This house wasn't a home. It was a stage set, and I'd been cast as the senile old man who couldn't manage his own finances, who needed to be protected from himself, who would sign over control to his daughter-in-law for his own good. Francis had given me something far more valuable than cash. She'd given me absolute clarity, and this house was waiting for me to read the rest of the ledger they'd tried to keep dark, because if they'd forged a conservatorship petition, there had to be a reason they needed legal control so desperately. That reason was hiding somewhere in these rooms. I walked back toward the kitchen, my engineer's mind already organizing the search pattern. Systematic, methodical. Every drawer, every file, every piece of paper they'd left behind in their arrogance. The next piece wasn't hidden in a drawer. It was pinned right on the refrigerator door, wedged between utility bills and a pizza delivery flyer. As if they'd never calculated I would stand in this kitchen to read it. I returned to the office, this time opening the bottom drawer of Sterling's desk. An engineer knows that the documentation for secondary liabilities is always filed beneath the primary asset, hidden where most people stop looking. The drawer slid open with a soft scrape against the metal tracks. Inside were manila folders, organized with the kind of precision that suggested Catalina's real estate training, color-coded tabs, alphabetical order, property tax 2024, insurance declarations, home maintenance records, and one folder labeled simply listing agreement. I pulled it out and opened it on the desk. Exclusive real estate listing agreement. Langley Realty, LLC letterhead. Dated December 15th, 2024, 1 week ago. Between Langley Realty, LLC and Westside Property Solutions, a name I didn't recognize. I scanned down to the property description. Property address 4820 Quail Ridge Drive, Lakewood, Colorado. My home. The house Francis and I bought 35 years ago when Sterling was still learning to walk. The house where I'd sanded floors and painted walls and replaced the furnace twice. The house I'd paid off completely 8 years ago so we could retire without mortgage debt. Status line pending vacant delivery. January 8th, 2025. Listing price $740,000. I stopped breathing. I knew the market value. I'd reviewed the county assessment 3 months ago when the property tax notice arrived. The assessment came in at $890,000, and the county typically appraised 10% below market, which meant the actual value was closer to $980,000. $740,000 was nearly $150,000 below market. This wasn't a property sale. This was a fire sale of an asset that doesn't belong to them. Desperate pricing, which means they need the cash fast. January 8th, 17 days from now. I did the calculation in my head. Christmas was December 25th. New Year's Day was January 1st. Most title companies ran skeleton crews between those dates. Most family lawyers took vacation. Most county recorder offices operated at half capacity. 17 days. Just enough time for me to sit quietly at home while they processed paperwork during the holiday blackout. For title companies to run on skeleton crews and family lawyers to take vacation. The timeline was deliberate. They needed me to remain physically at home, alone, excluded from the trip, while they executed the sale during the period when questions would be least likely to surface, and intervention would be most difficult to coordinate. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, every line item, every corporate seal, every signature line, the Langley Realty logo, the Westside Property Solutions contact information, the January 8th delivery date circled in red ink. Then I returned the document to the folder, returned the folder to the drawer, and closed it exactly as I'd found it. No evidence of my intrusion. I stood in Sterling's office with my hands resting on the desk and tried to process what I'd just discovered. Forged conservatorship petition claiming I'm mentally incompetent. Fraudulent medical certification from a facility I've never visited. Covert sale of my home at fire sale pricing with vacant delivery in 17 days. Exclusion from a family trip I'd funded timed precisely to keep me at home during the holiday transaction window. An aerospace engineer learns early that when you find one critical failure in a pressure system, you don't patch it blindly. You map the full extent of the rupture before you touch a single valve. This wasn't a family dispute about a ski vacation. This was systematic asset liquidation designed to strip me of everything I owned, while rendering me legally powerless to stop it. But there was still a gap in the timeline. Why did they need me to remain physically at home on December 24th, specifically? The conservatorship petition was filed, but not yet approved. The property sale wouldn't close until January 8th. So what required my physical presence at the Lakewood house on Christmas Eve? I walked back toward the kitchen. The answer wasn't hidden in a drawer. It was pinned right on the refrigerator door, wedged between utility bills and a pizza delivery flyer. A printed confirmation email from Colonial Home Appraisal Services to Sterling Harrington. Subject appointment. Confirmation December 24th, 2024. I pulled it off the refrigerator and read the full text. This email confirms your appointment for residential property appraisal at 4820 Quail Ridge. Drive, Lakewood, CO, on December 24th, 2024 at 2 p.m. Please ensure property owner or authorized representative is present to provide access to all interior spaces. Appraisal will be completed within 90 minutes. Report will be delivered within 48 hours for mortgage underwriting purposes. Mortgage underwriting purposes. They were refinancing my house, or taking out a loan against it, on December 24th. While I sat at home excluded from Aspen waiting for digital photos that would never adequately compensate for the exclusion I'd felt standing in that driveway. The appraiser would need someone present to let them inside. That someone was supposed to be me. The elderly man with fragile joints who couldn't handle mountain cold, but could absolutely unlock doors for property appraisers on Christmas Eve. I stood in Sterling's kitchen holding the confirmation email and understood the complete architecture of the trap. Step 1. Exclude me from the trip using concern for my health as cover. Step 2. Keep me physically present at the Lakewood house during the appraisal window. Step 3. Use the appraisal to secure financing or validate the fire sale listing price. Step 4. Execute the conservatorship petition, rendering me legally incompetent to challenge any of it. Step 5. Close the property sale on January 8th, pocket the proceeds, and present me with a fait accompli I'd have no legal standing to reverse. I photographed the email, front and back, every word, every timestamp. Then I pinned it back on the refrigerator, exactly where I'd found it, wedged between the gas bill and the pizza flyer. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The initial shock had converted into something colder, more precise. Frances had warned me. She'd seen Catalina's nature from the wedding day, and I'd dismissed it as motherly overcaution, as the concern of a woman who didn't want to share her son with someone new. But Frances had been an accountant for 30 years before she retired. She knew how to read a balance sheet. She knew how to spot discrepancies. She knew how to identify predatory behavior disguised as partnership. And she'd tried to tell me. The December 24th appraisal appointment would have explained everything about why elderly joints suddenly couldn't handle mountain skiing, but could absolutely stand in a Lakewood living room answering questions about square footage and furnace age. I needed to keep searching, because if they'd forged one document planned, one transaction excluded me from one trip to execute one appraisal, there had to be more. I needed to keep searching. The appraisal appointment had confirmed the timeline they needed me home alone on Christmas Eve, so the inspector could catalog my property without raising alarm. But there had to be more. I walked from the kitchen toward the back hallway, passing Sterling's cluttered office one more time, and noticed what I'd passed twice before without registering. Ivy's bedroom door slightly ajar, a faint blue glow reflecting off the hardwood floor. I stopped. The glow was steady, not flickering like a nightlight. More like a screen. I stepped toward the threshold, not intending to enter, just to check. The pink iPad Pro sat on Ivy's bed, still active, casting pale light across stuffed animals and astronomy posters. I'd bought this tablet for her 9th birthday last year. The iCloud account was linked to my primary email, because a 9-year-old doesn't have a standalone account yet. I picked up the device to lock the screen. That's when I saw the video folder. One file was still open in the preview window, titled Grandpa with a smiling emoji, dated December 19th, 3 days ago. Ivy frequently recorded short clips to send via our shared family app. Little messages, jokes, updates about school projects. I'd received dozens over the years, each one a small gift I saved and watched when I needed to remember why any of this mattered. I tapped play. The video opened with Ivy's face filling the frame, her red winter jacket bright against Sterling's dining room. She was smiling that gap-toothed smile she'd had since losing her front tooth in October. "Hi, Grandpa," she said to the camera. "I'm practicing my song for the Christmas concert." Then she started singing. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Her voice was pure and unself-conscious, the way only children's voices can be. She panned the tablet around the dining room, showing the table, the chairs, the window with December snow falling outside. But the microphone was still active, and it captured ambient audio from the kitchen behind her. Catalina's voice cut through clearly, sharp and clinical. "He won't understand the legal filings before we get back from Aspen. Then Sterling's voice quieter, uncertain. But my dad is going to... Catalina again cutting him off. Your father is 72 years old and hasn't reviewed a legal document since he retired. By the time he figures out what happened, the conservatorship will be filed and the house will be in contract. Then Ivy started singing louder, drowning out the remainder of the dialogue. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey, the video ended. I stood in my granddaughter's bedroom tablet, in my hand, listening to the silence that followed. A 9-year-old child singing Christmas carols, completely unaware that her microphone was capturing her parents, planning to rob her grandfather. If you've ever held evidence that your own child planned your destruction, and that evidence was recorded by the voice of the grandchild, you would die to protect. You know that heartbreak has layers grief can't reach. I replayed the video. Once, twice, 3 times, listening to Catalina's voice, the certainty, the clinical precision. By the time he figures out what happened, listening to Sterling's hesitation. But my dad is going to... What was he going to say? Object realized fight back. It didn't matter. Catalina had cut him off, and whatever resistance Sterling might have offered died in that kitchen 3 days ago, while his daughter sang about one-horse open sleighs in the next room. I navigated to the share menu and saved the file directly to my private cloud storage. Not the family iCloud, my personal encrypted backup that only I could access. The file uploaded in 4 seconds. Confirmation appeared, video saved to secure storage. I looked at the stuffed animals arranged on Ivy's bed. The purple elephant I'd given her when she was 3. The astronomy book we'd read together last summer about the James Webb Telescope. The drawing she'd made of the 2 of us looking at stars pinned to her bulletin board with a caption in crayon, me and Grandpa. Ivy, I'm sorry I have to use this, but I promise I'll protect you in a way you'll understand when you're older. I locked the iPad screen and laid it back down on the mattress exactly where it had been. Exactly the same angle. Exactly the same position. No evidence of my intrusion. Outside, the snow continued to blanket Denver. The house was still silent except for the refrigerator hum and the soft tick of the wall clock. I checked my watch, 9:38. They had been gone for over 2 hours. The Escalades were probably somewhere on I-70 by now, climbing toward the mountains, Ivy, watching snow through the window, while her parents congratulated themselves on excluding the elderly man who couldn't handle the cold. I walked back through the hallway toward the kitchen. My phone sat on the counter where I'd left it after photographing the conservatorship petition. I picked it up and scrolled through my contacts. There was only one person left on my registry of trust. One person who would understand what I'd found. One person who wouldn't tell me to forgive and forget, who wouldn't suggest family therapy or mediation or giving Sterling the benefit of the doubt. My younger sister. Marlene had been warning me about Catalina for 7 years, ever since the engagement party when she'd pulled me aside and said, "That woman looks at you like a retirement account, not a father-in-law." I dismissed it as sibling protectiveness, as the concern of a woman who didn't want to share her brother's attention. But Marlene had been a high school principal for 30 years before she retired. She knew how to read people. She knew how to spot manipulation. She knew how to identify predatory behavior disguised as ambition, just like Frances had known. I needed to clear the perimeter and make the call. But before I exited the residence, there was one more thing I had to check. One more lockbox in this house. Sterling's laptop. It sat on his desk in the office, closed but not locked away. And I knew that if I could access it, I would find the financial architecture behind everything I'd discovered. The bridge loans, the shell companies, the wire transfers, the complete accounting of how they planned to liquidate my entire life. I just needed the password. Sterling's office smelled like leather and lies. I stood in front of his mawboard desk, staring at the locked laptop he'd left behind in his rush to catch the Christmas cruise. The silver MacBook Pro mocked me with its password prompt, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat I no longer trusted. I'd tried the obvious combinations first. Sterling's birthday, Catalina's birthday, their anniversary. Nothing worked. 3 failed attempts meant I had 2 more before the system locked me out entirely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What would my son use? What mattered enough to him to memorize to type every single day? Then it hit me like a fist to the chest. I typed 031420022. The screen unlocked instantly. March 14th, 2022. The day Frances died. He'd turned my wife's death into his daily password. Every morning, every login, he typed the date she'd left this world. Was it guilt remembrance or something darker, a trophy? A reminder of the inheritance he'd helped Catalina claim. I had to grip the desk edge to steady myself. The room swam for a moment, and I forced myself to breathe. Focus. Gordon, you're here for evidence, not emotions. The desktop appeared organized with the precision of a man who trusted his secrets to stay hidden. I opened his email application, already logged in, of course. Sterling never expected anyone to breach his inner sanctum. I started with the most recent messages and worked backward. Shipping confirmations for the cruise, calendar invites for client meetings, CC'd emails about Langley Properties deals. Nothing unusual. Then I saw the sender name, Summit Bridge Capital. The subject line read, RI Emergency Bridge Loan, Harrington Collateral, approved. My mouth went dry. I clicked it open. Dear Mr. Langley, per your urgent request of December 15th, 2024, Summit Bridge Capital has approved your emergency bridge loan application in the amount of $1,800,000. Terms 18% APR, 90-day maturity, secured by collateral, as specified in your power of attorney documentation. First payment, $600,000, released December the 20th, 2024, to account ending 4738. Second payment, $600,000, scheduled December 24th, 2024. Final payment, $600,000, scheduled December 27th, 2024. Please acknowledge receipt and confirm collateral account access. I scrolled down to Sterling's reply. Confirmed. POA grants full access. Fidelity account 84729-HRG contains $1.4 million liquid, more than sufficient coverage. Proceed with schedule. He'd used a power of attorney, forged it had to be forged, to put my Fidelity account up as collateral for nearly $2 million. Money I didn't know about for purposes I couldn't fathom, secured against assets I'd spent 40 years building. My hands started shaking so badly I had to pull them away from the keyboard. How long could I stand here before my body gave out entirely? I looked up at the wall behind Sterling's desk. Frances smiled down at me from the silver-framed portrait, the one from our 30th anniversary. Her eyes bright with life. She'd had 3 more years to live. Had Sterling looked at her face every day while he plotted this? While he typed her death date to unlock his schemes? I forced my attention back to the screen. Keep going, there's more. I found the thread. I needed 3 emails down. The sender, Vernon Langley, vernon.langley@langleyrealty.com. Sterling. The Pinnacle lawsuit is accelerating. They're demanding $2.3 million by January 1st, 2025, or they file criminal fraud charges. We need liquid assets now. What's the status on zeroing out the old man's accounts? Sterling's response, sent at 11:47 p.m. on December 18th. In progress. Bridge loan approved, using his Fidelity as collateral without his knowledge. Once conservatorship is granted, hearing January 6th, we'll have full legal access to liquidate everything. First payment hits Friday. By the time he figures it out, the accounts will be drained, and the court will rule him incompetent to challenge it. The lawyer we hired, Hale, says Gordon's refusal to attend the psych evaluation works in our favor, makes him look unstable. We'll have $1.4 million from Fidelity, $3.5 million from Frances's life insurance when we trigger the payout, plus the house sale closes in January. More than enough to cover Pinnacle and fund the Vale expansion. Vernon's reply, perfect. Make sure the old man doesn't access his accounts before Christmas. If he sees the withdrawals, we're exposed. I sat down in Sterling's chair because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. They'd planned it all. The conservatorship petition to declare me incompetent. The bridge loan to drain my accounts before I could stop them. The life insurance scheme to cash in on Frances's death. Even the house sale, my home, the one I'd built with my own hands, was already earmarked for their debts. I wasn't a father to them anymore. I was a balance sheet, a solution to Vernon's legal problems and Sterling's cash flow crisis. I opened the email attachment, a PDF of the wire transfer receipt. Summit Bridge, Capital Wire, transfer, receipt date, December 20th, 2024, amount $600,000. Recipient Sterling P. Langley, account 4, 738, source collateral Fidelity account, 84729-HRG, $1,400,000 verified. Next scheduled payment, December the 24th, 2024-$600,000. December 24th, 2 days from now. If I didn't act before Christmas Eve, another $600,000 would vanish from my account, and I'd be 2/3 of the way to financial extinction. The 45-minute window I'd counted on suddenly felt like 45 seconds. I grabbed my phone and photographed everything: the emails, the wire receipt, the collateral confirmation, evidence, proof, the ammunition I'd need when Clifford Mercer opened his office on Monday morning. But Monday might be too late. The second payment would process automatically in 48 hours unless someone stopped it. I closed the laptop, the password prompt, reappearing like an epitaph. March 14th, 2022. Sterling had made one mistake. He'd assumed the dead couldn't fight back. He'd forgotten Francis had married an engineer, and engineers know that every system, no matter how carefully designed, has a breaking point. I left Sterling's office and climbed the stairs to the second floor. The master bedroom door stood open exactly as Catalina had left it yesterday morning. Her perfume still hung in the air, something expensive and cold. The walk-in closet stretched 15 feet deep. I moved past the shoe racks to the back wall, where a mahogany jewelry cabinet concealed what I'd come for. I pulled it aside. Behind it, a brushed steel wall, safe with an electronic keypad. I entered the house number, 2847. The tumbler clicked. The door swung open. She'd used the house number. My daughter-in-law had secured her secrets with 4 digits of pure arrogance. She kept this safe at home instead of with estate attorneys, because she wanted access, because she reviewed its contents regularly. Inside a blue leather binder stamped with gold letters, Emeritus Life Insurance. I pulled it out. Behind it lay estate documents, Catalina's passport stock certificates. But the binder was what mattered. I carried it to the window where winter light slanted through the blinds. Policy AL-8847293-2024. Insured party, Gordon Wesley Harrington. Coverage, amount $3,500,000. $3.5 million. On my life. I flipped to the policy history page. Previous coverage, $1,200,000. Issued 2019. Escalation date, November 18th, 2024. New coverage, $3,500,000. November 18th. 3 weeks after the business sale closed. They'd escalated my death benefit the moment they'd secured the assets. I turned to the beneficiary page. Beneficiary primary, Catalina. Rose Cole Langley. Relationship daughter. Change effective. November 7th, 2024. Previous beneficiary, Sterling Paul Langley. November 7th. The day after the sale proceeds hit my account. Catalina had walked into an insurance office and changed the paperwork, so Sterling's name disappeared and hers took its place. Why would she cut her own husband out of a multi-million-dollar death benefit? Page 7 had the answer. Special provisions. Accidental. Death and dismemberment. AD&D double indemnity clause. In the event of death by accidental, means benefit shall be paid at 200% of face value. Accidental death benefits $7 million. $7 million if I died accidentally. They weren't planning theft. They were planning a funeral. I sank onto the bench beneath the window, the binder open across my knees. November 7th. That was the date stamped across my death warrant. 5 weeks later, I'd sat across from Catalina at Thanksgiving dinner, passed her the mashed potatoes, asked about Ivy's school play. She'd smiled and asked whether I was keeping up with my heart medication, because she'd already decided what my life was worth, because she was calculating whether accidental death would pay double. I forced myself to breathe. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, the coverage amount, the escalation date, the beneficiary change, the double indemnity clause. Evidence that this wasn't financial exploitation anymore. This was something darker. I returned the binder to the safe, closed the door, pushed the jewelry cabinet back into place. I couldn't use the front door. The security camera would timestamp my exit, and Sterling monitored that feed. I moved downstairs to the laundry room, where a casement window overlooked the side yard. I unlocked it, pushed it open, squeezed through into snow that had piled 8 inches deep overnight. The cold hit like a slap. I closed the window behind me and circled to the neighbor's driveway, where the oak tree blocked sightlines from the street cameras. I pulled out my phone and called a cab. 1670. Broadway, I said when the dispatcher answered. How long in this snow? 20 minutes, sir. Driver's 4 blocks out. I waited under the oak tree until the yellow sedan pulled up. The driver didn't ask questions. I climbed into the back seat and pulled out my phone as we merged into traffic on Colorado Boulevard. The snow had turned Denver into a crawl break. Lights stretched ahead like a red river. I dialed Clifford Mercer's direct line. He answered on the second ring. Gordon, I wasn't expecting to hear from you on a Sunday. Clifford had been my estate attorney for 30 years, a methodical man in his late 60s, with silver hair and the unflappable demeanor of someone who'd seen every flavor of family betrayal. He'd handled Frances' estate after she died. He knew every asset I owned and every person I'd trusted to inherit them. I need to see you immediately, I said. I'm 10 minutes from your office. What's happened? Catalina and Sterling filed a conservatorship petition to have me declared incompetent. They forged a medical certificate. They're selling my house with a January 8th delivery date. They took out a $1.8 million bridge loan using a fraudulent power of attorney and put my Fidelity account up as collateral. I heard Clifford's chair creak, and they escalated my life insurance to $3.5 million and switched the beneficiary to Catalina 6 weeks ago. I continued. This isn't financial exploitation, Clifford. This is a murder plan with a December timeline. 4 seconds of silence. Then come to my office immediately. Don't go home. Don't call Sterling. Don't touch any assets they're monitoring for defensive moves. How long do I have? The January 8th home delivery gives us 16 days. But if they discover you know that timeline collapses, the taxi hit a pothole. My phone nearly slipped from my hand. The screen lit up Sterling calling. I declined it and watched the call disappear into voicemail. The first time in my adult life, I'd refused to answer my son's call. I'm pulling up now, I told Clifford. I have photographs of everything. Good. Don't delete anything. Bring the phone. He hung up. The taxi turned onto Broadway wipers fighting the snow. Downtown towers rose gray against the white sky. My phone buzzed again. Sterling's text. Dad, where are you? Catalina's worried. Call me. Another buzz. We need to talk about Christmas plans. Another. Getting concerned. Please respond. I silenced the phone without answering. Worried. They were worried because the asset had left the facility, and they couldn't track the inventory. The taxi slowed. Through the windshield, I saw 1670 Broadway Clifford's building, 23 stories of glass and steel. The driver pulled to the curb. Here you go, sir. I paid him cash, stepped into the storm. My phone vibrated again in my pocket, Sterling's 5th text in 20 minutes. I left it unanswered and walked toward the revolving doors, knowing that the moment I entered Clifford's office and filed legal papers, my family would discover I knew. The 16-day timeline would detonate into something much faster, much more dangerous. But the alternative was waiting for December 24th, waiting for the second wire transfer, waiting to see whether the accidental death clause was a contingency plan or an active timeline. I pushed through the doors into the lobby and pressed the elevator button for the 18th floor. The elevator opened on the 11th floor. I stepped into Clifford's law office, and the receptionist waved me toward the conference room. Without a word, Clifford had warned her I was coming. Marlene was already sitting at the table when I walked in. My sister had beaten me here, which meant she'd known about the conspiracy long enough to arrive first. Her coffee sat cold on the glass table, untouched. She looked up when I entered, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. The protective fury of a woman who'd spent 40 years teaching high school students to recognize predators. Sterling called me yesterday, she said before I could speak. Asked if I'd noticed any memory problems, confusion, risky decisions. I told him you were sharper than men half your age, but he already had answers he wanted. I sat down across from her. What did you tell Clifford? That if my nephew is building a medical case against you, he's building it on lies. Clifford entered carrying a leather portfolio and closed the door behind him. He nodded at Marlene, then turned to me. Show me everything, he said. I pulled out my phone and opened Signal. The encrypted photos loaded one by one the iPad screenshots, showing the $67,000 trip itinerary and the conservatorship petition, the laptop images of the Summit Bridge Capital, emails $1.8 million secured against my Fidelity account without my knowledge, the insurance policy pages showing $3.5 million with Catalina as beneficiary and the double indemnity clause. Clifford scrolled through them in silence. 3 minutes passed. Marlene leaned over to look, her hand tightening on the edge of the table when she saw the insurance escalation date. Finally, Clifford set the phone down. Colorado. Revised statutes. Section 1514403 requires 14-day written notice and formal hearing before any conservatorship, he said. They filed ex parte using a fraudulent medical certificate. This petition is fatally defective and subject to immediate dismissal. The fraudulent medical certification and forged signature provide grounds for emergency motion to strike. Latin doesn't stop the December 24th wire transfer, I said. No, Clifford agreed, but freezing the accounts does. He stood and moved to the whiteboard mounted on the conference room wall. He picked up a blue marker and wrote a number 1. Point 1, freeze fidelity before the 24th. Point 2, revoke every power of attorney. Sterling holds medical, financial, all proxies. Point 3, independent cognitive evaluation from a neurologist to destroy their incapacity narrative. Marlene watched him write point 4 through 7. Clifford kept writing, his handwriting precise and level. Insurance fraud complaint to state regulators. Forensic audit demand on Summit Bridge Capital. Formal eviction notice for the house your unfunded trust gives you that authority. And Adult Protective Services emergency flag. We turn their conspiracy into a crime scene. I stared at the whiteboard. 7 numbered points. Freeze, revoke, evaluate, report, audit, evict, protect a surgical checklist for dismantling a family, one legal motion at a time. Timeline, I asked. Clifford capped the marker. Freeze the accounts today. I'll have the motions drafted tonight and filed tomorrow morning. But the moment we freeze Fidelity Sterling, we'll know you've moved defensively. He already knows I'm missing, I said. He sent 10 texts in the last 3 hours. Then we move now. Clifford made a phone call. 10 minutes later, we were in his car heading south on Broadway Marlene, in the backseat snow still falling across downtown Denver. The Fidelity branch at 1700 Lincoln Street occupied the ground floor of a steel and glass tower. We walked in at 3 o'clock. Clifford asked for the branch manager by name. Teresa Walsh appeared from a back office 2 minutes later, a woman in her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back and the wary efficiency of someone who'd handled financial crimes before. Clifford handed her his card. She looked at it, looked at me, and gestured us into her private office. What's the situation? She asked once the door closed. Clifford laid it out in 4 sentences. Fraudulent power of attorney. Forged conservatorship petition. $1.8 million bridge loan, using my assets as unauthorized collateral. Life insurance escalation suggesting existential threat. Teresa picked up her desk phone and dialed a number from memory. This is Teresa Walsh, branch manager, Lincoln Street, Denver. I need corporate legal. Elder abuse case, emergency hold request. She was on the phone for 32 minutes. Clifford and I sat in silence, watching the snow accumulate on the street outside. At one point, Teresa said, fraudulent POA, forged conservatorship petition, $1.8 million. Bridge loan using client assets as unauthorized collateral, requesting emergency hold under Colorado Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act. When she hung up, she looked at me directly. I'm initiating an emergency hold request under the Colorado Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act, she said. It will be fully processed by tomorrow morning. No withdrawals transfers or liquidations will clear in the interim. No withdrawals without court order and your physical presence with 2 forms of ID. I felt something release in my chest, a pressure I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since I'd opened Sterling's laptop 6 hours ago. The December 24th payment, I asked. Flagged for manual review and will not process automatically, Teresa said. Once the emergency hold clears tomorrow morning, it will be fully blocked. She turned to her computer, typed something, and scrolled through system logs. Her finger stopped on the screen. December 19th, 2:47 p.m. liquidation attempt denied. What is that? Clifford asked. Teresa rotated the monitor so we could see. System shows liquidation attempt Thursday, December 19th, 2:47 p.m., same timestamp as the bridge loan wire you mentioned. POA authorization failed secondary verification. Attempt denied. Clifford leaned forward. They already tried to drain it, and the system stopped them. So the December 24th transfer I started was always going to fail, Teresa finished. But now they know we know, and your son has been calling you for 3 hours. She printed a certified receipt documenting the account freeze and the fraud investigation launch. I folded it into my jacket pocket. We left the building at 4:15 p.m. The sky had gone dark, streetlights reflecting off fresh snow. Clifford walked Marlene to her car, and I stood on the sidewalk checking my phone. 10 missed calls from Sterling, 3 from Catalina. I thought about Teresa's final words as we'd shaken hands in her office. They know we know. By now, Sterling had called the Fidelity Fraud Department, discovered the freeze, realized his own father had moved from target to adversary. The accounts were protected. The conspiracy was documented. The legal counteroffensive was ready to file tomorrow morning. But the 16-day timeline had just collapsed into something much faster. I silenced my phone and walked toward Clifford's car, where Marlene waited to drive me to her house in Capitol Hill. Tomorrow, we'd file the motions. Tonight, I needed to decide whether staying hidden was still the right strategy, or whether Sterling's 10 unanswered calls meant he was already moving to the next phase of whatever plan the insurance policy's double indemnity clause had been designed to fund. Clifford was already dialing Emeritus Insurance Compliance before his car engine finished turning over. The speakerphone filled the parking garage with hold music while I buckled my seatbelt and prepared to hear exactly when Catalina had decided my life was worth more dead than alive. The hold music cut off. Emeritus Special Investigative Unit, this is Rebecca. Rebecca, this is Clifford Mercer, attorney at law, calling on behalf of my client, Gordon Harrington, policyholder. We need to discuss an unauthorized beneficiary modification executed November 7th. Policy number, Clifford read it from his notes. Keyboard clicks. What's the issue? Rebecca asked. The beneficiary change was executed without my client's knowledge or consent. We're pursuing elder financial abuse charges and need transaction metadata. Beneficiary modification. November 7th, 4:18 p.m. Mountain Time, submitted through policyholder online portal using social security number ending 4421 and registered email address. 4:18 p.m. 2 days after the business sale closed, that email address and those credentials were used without authorization. Clifford said, I need IP address metadata and device fingerprint logs for fraud investigation. That requires special investigative unit escalation. We need formal Adult Protective Services demand or law enforcement subpoena. You'll have APS documentation within the hour. Clifford hung up and pulled out of the parking garage. Snow had stopped, but the roads were slick. Brake lights glowing red ahead. November 7th at 4:18, I said. 2 days after the sale closed. When did the proceeds hit your account? November 5th, 3.8 million. 48 hours from windfall to death. Benefit optimization, Clifford said. That's not opportunity crime, that's operational planning. I opened my phone's calendar. November 5th, the sale money hit. November 7th, she logged into the insurance portal using my social security number. November 28th, she sat across from me at Thanksgiving dinner and asked if I'd updated my will. I stopped phone screen bright in the darkening car. November 7th to November 28th was 21 days. 3 weeks between Catalina betting on my death and asking me to pass the gravy boat at my own table. She had already monetized my funeral when she asked me to carve the turkey, I said. Clifford didn't respond. He just drove until we pulled into the underground garage at 1670 Broadway. Upstairs, Clifford uploaded a signed APS preliminary complaint, while I texted Marlene the address. She arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a Walgreens bag toothbrush, razor-clean shirt. She'd assumed I wouldn't be going home tonight. She was right. At 6 o'clock, Clifford ordered pizza. We ate while he spread property files across the conference table. Closing documents from 2021, when Sterling and Catalina had moved into 2847 Vine Street. Deed records, trust documents, transfer tax filings. Marlene watched him work. You're looking at property files at 7 p.m. on a Sunday because Sterling tried to sell Gordon's house with a January 8th delivery date. Clifford said, and I want to know how he planned to transfer title he doesn't own. He flipped through pages, cross-referencing dates and document numbers. I finished my second slice and watched the snow fall past the windows downtown Denver, quiet on a Sunday night. Here, Clifford said suddenly. He spread 3 documents side by side, the 2021 Trust Creation Agreement, the Cherry Creek Deed from 2019, and a blank space where something should have been. Your 2021 estate plan created the trust, he said, But look, no recorded assignment deed, no transfer tax filing, no trustee acceptance. The trust is a legal ghost. You still own the house outright. I leaned forward. Sterling's been living there for 3 years, thinking it's his. Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 134104, says you can serve any unauthorized occupant with a 10-day notice to quit. Clifford's fingers stabbed the page where the assignment deed should have been. Exception assignment deed to be recorded following execution. But the deed was never executed, never recorded, never filed. They verified your bank accounts, your investments, your insurance, but they never title checked the house they sleep in. Marlene set down her pizza. You're saying the trust doesn't actually hold the property? Under Colorado CRS Section 1516, 207, an unfunded revocable trust gives the grantor absolute declarant power. Clifford said, Gordon created the trust structure, but Sterling never completed the transfer. The house is still Gordon's. Sterling's a tenant without a lease. 3 years Sterling had lived in that house, hosted Christmas dinners, planted roses in Francis's backyard, repainted Catalina's childhood bedroom, all while assuming he owned it, all while never bothering to check whether the legal transfer had actually happened. He'd been so busy forging powers of attorney and filing fraudulent conservatorship petitions that he'd missed the one asset he thought was already secure. How fast can you draft an eviction notice? I asked. Clifford checked his watch. 30 minutes. Do it. He opened his laptop and started typing. Marlene and I cleared the pizza boxes while the keyboard clicked. Outside the windows downtown, Denver glowed through the December darkness. Buildings lit for Christmas streets empty. At 7:45, Clifford printed 2 copies of a 10-day notice to vacate. He slid one across the table. Sign here, he said. Your real signature, not whatever Sterling's been forging on POAs and loan documents. I picked up the pen. The notice was addressed to Sterling Paul Langley and Catalina Rose Cole Langley. Occupants 2847, Vine Street, Denver, CO 80220. It cited Colorado unlawful detainer statute and gave them 10 days to vacate. Marlene watched me sign. They plan to evict me from my life. I'm giving them 10 days to pack. I signed my name, Gordon Wesley Harrington, the same signature I'd used on my business incorporation papers 40 years ago, on Francis's marriage license, on Sterling's birth certificate. The signature Sterling had been forging for months without bothering to practice it properly. Clifford took the notice, sealed it in a certified mail envelope, and wrote Monday's date across the seal. Service first thing tomorrow morning, he said. By noon they'll know they have until the following Wednesday to get out. Marlene looked at me across the conference table. When they get this notice, what do you think they'll do? I looked at the sealed envelope. Sterling and Catalina would receive it tomorrow. 72 hours to vacate the house they thought they'd already inherited. The accounts were frozen. The insurance fraud was flagged. The conservatorship petition was void. But Marlene's question hung in the air between us unanswered. What would they do when they discovered they'd lost everything? I couldn't answer Marlene's question, not in Clifford's conference room with the eviction notice sealed and the legal machinery ready to deploy. So I told her I needed to go home. Stay at my place tonight, she said in the parking garage. You shouldn't be alone. I need to be alone, I said. I need to think like an engineer, not a father. She didn't argue. She just hugged me and drove toward Capitol Hill, and I drove west toward Lakewood through empty white streets. The house was dark when I unlocked the door at 10:08 p.m. Exactly the way I needed it. No sister asking questions, no attorney offering contingencies, just silence and the engineering discipline that had built a 40-year career and would now dismantle a family. I turned on the kitchen light. Mail sat piled on the counter forwarded from Cherry Creek. I didn't open any of it. I just filled the coffee maker press start and sat down at the table. The drawer to my left held pens, rubber bands, old birthday cards. I opened it, reaching for a pen, and saw the folded paper underneath. Francis's handwriting, blue ink on lined note paper. My hands shook when I unfolded it. March 9th, 2022, 5 days before she died. I read it aloud to the empty kitchen. Trust your engineering, not your heart. The math never lies. When you face something impossible, break it into nodes and solve each one sequentially. I love you. F. She'd written this in hospice when the morphine made her hands shake and every word cost her. I'd found it in her nightstand after the funeral and tucked it away because reading it felt like drowning. Now I placed it face up beside my coffee mug. She'd known. Somehow she'd known that Sterling would make me choose between being a father and being a survivor. That I'd need permission to stop feeling and start calculating. Trust your engineering, not your heart. I pulled my journal from my jacket and opened to a blank page. 42 years I'd designed pressure systems, flow rates, failure points, cascade dependencies. This was just another schematic. Just another problem with a solution. I wrote Node 1 at the top left and drew a box around it. Monday, December 23rd, 9 a.m. Independent medical evaluation. Neurologist appointment Clifford would confirm in the morning. Objective cognitive assessment to destroy Sterling's incapacity narrative. Node. 2 below and to the right. Tuesday, December 24th. Revoke all powers of attorney medical financial. Every proxy Sterling had forged or legitimately held. Requires Node 1 completion as evidence of capacity. Node 3. Wednesday, December 25th. Insurance fraud complaint to state regulators with medical evaluation proving competence. Christmas Day filing poetic and tactical. The coffee maker beeped. I ignored it and kept writing. Node 4. Wednesday, January 1st. Execute eviction 10 days from Monday service. Sheriff-assisted removal, if necessary. Node 5. Friday, December 27th. Summit Bridge Capital Forensic Audit demand. Fraudulent POA documentation unauthorized collateral pledge. Node 6. Saturday, December 28th. Adult Protective Services Emergency Protective Order. Account freeze asset monitoring investigation launch. Node 7. Sunday, December 29th. Emergency guardianship block filing. Preemptive motion preventing Sterling from filing amended conservatorship while APS investigation active. I drew arrows connecting each node. Dependencies cascading like valves in sequence. Node 2 required node 1 completion. Node 3 required nodes 1 and 2. Nodes 5 through 7 depended on upstream integrity. The flowchart looked exactly like the pressure relief schematics I'd drawn for 30 years nodes, connected by arrows failure points circled in red. Except this system wasn't managing steam flow. It was managing the systematic destruction of my son-in-law's conspiracy. I added contingencies in the margins. If node 1 delayed nodes 2 to 3, shift right 24 hours. If node 4 contested parallel track through unlawful detainer hearing. If node 6 denied escalate through district attorney, elder abuse unit. I checked the work 3 times like a quality control review, traced each arrow, verified each dependency, calculated the critical path. 7 nodes, 7 days, December 23rd through 29th. By December 30th, either I'd control my life or I'd be in a facility, watching them liquidate everything Francis and I had built. The kitchen clock read 1:30 a.m. I'd been working for 3 hours. I closed the journal, drank the cold coffee, and turned off the light. The house settled into darkness. Snow slid off the roof in soft whispers, a sound I'd heard every winter for 53 years. The furnace kicked on. The refrigerator hummed. I stood in the dark kitchen, listening, and for the first time since finding the iPad, I let myself feel the full weight of what I was about to do. Weaponize 40 years of engineering discipline against the boy Catalina had married. The man who'd called me dad for 22 years. The father of my only grandchild. Francis had died in the bedroom upstairs. We'd celebrated 41 anniversaries in this house. Sterling had learned to ride a bike in that driveway. And now I was drawing schematics to keep them from stealing the foundation out from under all of it. The snow sounded like breathing, like the house was alive and knew what was coming. I climbed the stairs and set my phone alarm for 6 a.m., 4 hours away. 4 hours before Clifford would call to confirm the medical evaluation, before Node 1 went live, before the schematic became operational. I lay down fully clothed, the journal on the nightstand. Streetlight through the window illuminated the flowchart 7 numbered boxes that would either restore my autonomy or prove that engineering discipline couldn't protect you from people who knew exactly which pressure points to attack. My phone showed 14 missed calls. Sterling had stopped texting and started calling every 20 minutes. He knew the Fidelity accounts were frozen. He'd probably discovered Teresa Walsh had launched an investigation. By 9 a.m. Monday, I'd have medical proof of competence. By noon Monday, he'd have the eviction notice. By Monday night, he'd know I wasn't the confused old man he'd been selling to judges and insurance companies. 4 hours of sleep, Then the schematic became operational. I closed my eyes and listened to the house breathe, and somewhere across Denver, Sterling slept in a house he was about to discover he'd never owned. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. I'd slept 4 hours. By 8:30, I was showered, dressed, and sitting in Clifford's car with Marlene in the back seat and my engineering journal in my lap. The 7-node flowchart was ready. Node 1 was launching. We arrived at 1575 Sherman Street at 8:55. The Adult Protective Services office occupied 3 floors of a gray municipal building that looked like every government facility I'd ever visited. Industrial carpet, fluorescent lights, security desk in the lobby. A man in his mid-40s met us at the 3rd-floor reception area. "I'm Owen Fletcher, APS investigator, Mr. Cole." We shook hands. He led us to a conference room with a digital recorder on the table and a whiteboard on the wall. He looked like someone who'd spent 20 years asking hard questions, tired eyes, methodical movements, the kind of patience that came from interviewing people on the worst days of their lives. Clifford set his evidence binder on the table. "We're filing a complaint under the Colorado Adult Protective Services Act." Owen sat down and opened a case intake form. Colorado APS Act, Section 263.1101, defines financial exploitation as unauthorized use of resources through fraud, deception, or undue influence. "Walk me through what happened." Clifford flipped open the binder. His son forged medical incapacity documentation filed ex parte conservatorship without notice, used fraudulent power of attorney to execute a bridge loan. His son's wife changed life insurance beneficiary to herself, and together they contracted to sell Mr. Harrington's home. Evidence is documented. Owen pulled the binder toward him and started reading, page by page. The forged medical certificate from Dr. Marcus Holland, the conservatorship petition, the Summit Bridge capital emails showing the loan secured against my Fidelity account, the insurance policy with Catalina's beneficiary, change dated November 7th, the home sale contract with January 8th delivery. He took notes in a leather notebook, his pen scratching across the page, asked clarifying questions, dates, amounts, relationships. "And the perpetrator is your son, Mr. Harrington." "Yes, Sterling, my son. His wife, Catalina, orchestrated most of this." Owen kept reading. 9:15 became 9:30. 9:30 became 9:45. The room was quiet except for turning pages and Marlene's breathing beside me. At 9:47 a.m., Owen set down his pen and looked at me directly. "Mr. Harrington, if this investigation results in felony charges against your son and his wife, are you prepared to live with that outcome?" The room went silent. Marlene's hand found mine under the table. I'd known this question was coming. I'd rehearsed the answer at 2 a.m. while staring at the flowchart. But hearing it spoken out loud in an official government interview room was different from imagining it in the dark. Owen waited, patient, used to silence. "I want the investigation to run where the evidence leads," I said. "If that means felony charges, then my son-in-law made choices that have felony consequences." Owen nodded but didn't write anything down. "I need to hear you say it clearly. You understand this could result in criminal prosecution of your son and his wife." Marlene's grip tightened like she was anchoring me to the decision I was about to make out loud, with a case file number that would follow Sterling and Catalina for the rest of their lives. "I understand," I said, "and I'm filing anyway." Owen picked up his pen and wrote something in the notebook. "All right," he said. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm opening an active investigation." He turned to his computer and typed for 3 minutes. Then he rotated the screen so we could see. "Case file APS-202-4-Denver-4471. Subjects: Sterling, Paul Langley, Catalina. Rose, Cole. Langley, complainant. Gordon Wesley, Harrington investigator. Owen Fletcher badge. 2847. Status active dash. Preliminary investigation." "This triggers a 10 business day preliminary investigation," Owen said. "If evidence supports criminal charges, I refer to the Denver District Attorney. I can issue an emergency protective order within 48 hours. If I determine imminent threat to your assets." Clifford leaned forward. "This evidence supports it." "I agree," Owen said. "I'll have the protective order by Christmas Day. It will freeze all accounts, prevent asset transfers, and prohibit contact with financial institutions using your credentials." He printed a copy of the case file screen and slid it across the table. Keep this. Your case number is APS-2024-Denver-4471. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. We left the building at 10:30. Clifford drove while I sat in the passenger seat holding the case file printout. Marlene was quiet in the back. Summit Bridge Capital next, Clifford said. He pulled over at a Starbucks parking lot and dialed a number on speakerphone. Summit Bridge Capital Compliance Department. This is Clifford Mercer, attorney at law, calling regarding bridge loan account for Sterling Langley. I need to speak with your compliance officer. A hold. 90 seconds. Then a woman's voice. This is Rachel in compliance. How can I help you? The power of attorney authorizing your bridge loan was forged, Clifford said. Colorado Revised Statutes. Section 1514-705 makes that a Class 5 felony. Section 18.4.401 makes disbursing under fraudulent inducement a separate felony. Adult Protective Services opened a case file this morning. Silence on the other end. I need to consult external counsel before responding, Rachel said. Her voice had changed in those two words from procedural to cold. You have 24 hours, Clifford said. After that, I file complaints with the Colorado Division of Financial Services and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, identifying you as accessory to elder financial exploitation. Your compliance department will freeze the loan within 12 hours. He hung up. We were pulling back onto the street when Clifford's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then pulled over again. Your daughter-in-law just posted this, he said, tilting the screen toward me. Instagram, Catalina's account. The photo showed Sterling and Catalina at a bar with mountain views, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. Two champagne flutes raised toward the camera, both of them smiling. Sterling's arm around Catalina's shoulders. The caption read, Mountain Getaway Before the Holidays. The location tag, St. Regis, Aspen. Posted 10:15 a.m. 90 minutes ago, while I was sitting in Owen Fletcher's interview room, opening a felony investigation 300 miles away. They're drinking champagne in Aspen, I said, while I'm filing felony charges in Denver. Clifford zoomed in on the photo. They think they've won. They think you're still the confused old man they've been selling to judges. They're about to get served an eviction notice, discover their funding is frozen, and learn APS has them on a felony investigation timeline. Let them drink champagne. It's the last celebration they'll have for a very long time. Clifford drove us from the Starbucks parking lot to Larimer Street. The Instagram post of Sterling and Catalina toasting in Aspen was still open on his phone screen when we parked outside Snooze at 2:12 p.m. The man who wired $50,000 for your house is inside, Clifford said. He called my office this morning after Langley Realty told him closing was delayed. We walked in past the post-lunch crowd. Dalton Reed was already sitting in the corner booth when I spotted him, a man in his mid-30s, with the hollow expression of someone who just figured out the $50,000 deposit wasn't buying a house. It was funding someone else's theft. He stood when we approached. Mr. Cole, I'm Dalton Reed. We shook hands. He was younger than I'd expected, dressed in tech casual clothes that said software engineer before he mentioned it. Relocated from Austin to work at Palantir. Coffee sat untouched in front of him, gone cold. Mr. Reed, I'm sorry we're meeting like this, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. When you saw the listing for my Lakewood house, the price probably seemed perfect for your family. Now you're understanding why. I'm starting to, Reed said. Clifford set his tablet on the table between us. Mr. Reed contacted our office this morning after receiving notice from Langley Realty. That closing was delayed. He started asking questions. How much did you put down? I asked. Reed's jaw tightened. $50,000. Wired December 18th to Langley Realty Holdings. Vernon Langley said the seller was motivated estate liquidation. I asked twice for a certified title search. He said it would clear after the holidays. Closing was January 8th. December 18th. The same week Sterling had executed the bridge loan fraud. The same week Vernon had filed the fraudulent conservatorship petition. I never authorized a sale, I said. I didn't know my house was listed until 4 days ago. Reed looked down at his coffee. I relocated my wife and 2 kids from Austin for this job. We're living an extended stay. That $50,000 was our entire down payment savings. The pricing was under market, Clifford asked. 40,000 below comparable sales, Reed said. I thought we'd gotten lucky. First house in Colorado, great neighborhood priced for a young family. Too good to pass up. Clifford opened his tablet and pulled up the evidence folder. Vernon accepted your $50,000 deposit, knowing he couldn't deliver clear title. The conservatorship petition claiming Gordon is incapacitated is fraudulent. The trust that was supposed to hold the house was never funded. Gordon owns the property outright. Sterling and Vernon had no authority to list it. He turned the screen toward Reed, page by page. The forged conservatorship petition listing me as mentally incompetent. The fraudulent power of attorney Sterling had used for the home sale contract. The unfunded trust documents, proving I still owned the property. I watched Reed's face as Clifford explained the unfunded trust. Watched the moment a 30-something software engineer from Austin realized his $50,000 hadn't disappeared into ordinary real estate complications, but into a conspiracy that weaponized family law to steal a 72-year-old man's entire life. So my 50 grand is just gone, Reed asked, funding their operating expenses, unless you help us get it back, Clifford said. Reed stared at the tablet screen. The evidence I'd photographed 4 days ago in Sterling's office. The policy with Catalina's beneficiary change. The bridge loan emails. The home sale contract with his signature on the buyer line and Sterling's forged signature on the seller line. What do you need from me? Reed asked. Before I tell you what Reed agreed to do, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think he should testify, or B, if you think he should walk away and tell me why, in one sentence. Please note, what follows contains recreated dialogue for narrative purposes. But the lesson is what matters. If dramatized details aren't for you, you're free to stop here. Clifford leaned forward. If you're willing to testify for the Denver District Attorney and provide documentation, you become the key witness. Not family, not interested party. Just a defrauded buyer with wire records and email proof. Reed went silent for 20 seconds. His finger traced the edge of his coffee cup. Outside the window, Larimer Street traffic crawled past in the December cold. Then he looked up at me. I want my $50,000 back, he said. And I want Vernon prosecuted so he can't do this to another family trying to buy their first Colorado home. You understand this becomes a criminal case, Clifford said. You'd be testifying against Langley Realty. Vernon Langley, possibly Sterling. DA referral depositions potential trial. I'll testify, Reed said. I'll provide everything, wire transfers, emails, text messages, the listing screenshots I saved. Whatever you need to stop this. He pulled out his phone and started forwarding emails to Clifford's address. The original listing, Vernon's responses about the title search, the delay notice he'd received this morning, the wire transfer confirmation from December 18th showing $50,000 sent to Langley Realty Holdings, LLC. Evidence, documentation, third-party corroboration that transformed the case from family dispute to pattern fraud with an independent victim. At 2:58, Reed stood and reached across the table to shake my hand. Mr. Harrington, I'll do whatever it takes to get us both justice, he said. He put on his coat, then paused at the edge of the booth and turned back. My dad died last year. He said, his hand still extended mid-handshake. I'd give anything for one more conversation with him. But your son-in-law is trying to steal your life while you're still living it. I've never seen family do this to blood. Neither had I said, until 4 days ago. Reed nodded, pulled his hand back, and walked toward the exit. The door chimed when he pushed through it. I watched through the window as he disappeared down Larimer Street into the December cold. The home buyer who'd lost $50,000 and just became the independent witness who would transform a family legal battle into a multi-defendant fraud prosecution. Clifford closed his tablet. That's your midpoint reversal. You're not defending yourself anymore. You're coordinating the trap. We drove back to Clifford's office after Dalton Reed walked into the December cold. The midpoint reversal, Clifford had called it. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was coordinating the trap. It was 4:06 p.m. when we walked back into 1670 Broadway. Clifford's computer workstation blinked with a notification, the kind of alert attorneys set up to monitor court filings involving their clients. He clicked it open. Court notification, he said. Family division. Someone just filed. Wait. Marlene moved closer to the screen. Filed what? Clifford read for 10 seconds in silence. Then dissolution of marriage petition. Uncontested. Filed by Catalina Cole Langley. requesting divorce from Sterling, Paul Langley. I stared at the screen, the Denver County Court logo, case number, filing timestamp. When I asked, Clifford scrolled down. Filed December 22nd, 7:23 a.m. Electronic submission via mobile device. December 22nd, the day Sterling had sent the exclusion text, the day they'd left for Aspen. IP metadata shows United Airlines in-flight Wi-Fi. Clifford continued. She filed for divorce from the airplane before it landed in Aspen. Marlene went still. She knew. Before they even arrived, she knew she was leaving him. I looked at the timestamp again. 7:23 a.m. Sterling's text had arrived at 6:40 a.m. Family exclusion, he'd called it. 43 minutes later, Catalina had executed a divorce petition from 35,000 feet and then ordered champagne at St. Regis 40 minutes after wheels touched down. That Sterling thinks this vacation is saving their marriage, I said. She filed for divorce at 35,000 feet and then toasted with him at the bar. Clifford pulled up the full petition. Pages of legal language. Marlene read over his shoulder her paralegal training from 30 years ago coming back. Look at the filing language, she said, pointing at Section 4. Community Property Division deferred pending resolution of financial investigations. She knows the APS case is coming. She's positioning herself as unwitting spouse before the felony charges land. Clifford nodded. She gets half the stolen assets files for divorce, claiming she didn't know, and walks away while Sterling takes the conspiracy charges alone. Extraction strategy, prepared before the DIA gate, before the champagne photo, before Sterling even realized what was happening. I felt something unexpected looking at that timestamp. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but pity for my son-in-law sitting in Aspen thinking a mountain vacation would save his marriage, while his wife had already executed the legal paperwork to abandon him before breakfast was served on the flight. My daughter-in-law, I said quietly, is making my own son the sole defendant. And he has no idea, Marlene said. We stood around Clifford's workstation for another 20 minutes reviewing the petition. Then Marlene drove me home to Lakewood, and I spent Christmas Eve alone. Christmas morning arrived cold and silent. No tree, no decorations, no calls. I sat at the kitchen table with my engineering journal open and executed Node 3 insurance fraud complaint to state regulators submitted electronically at 9 a.m. Christmas Day, with medical evaluation proving competence and beneficiary change, timeline proving premeditation, poetic and tactical, just as I'd written in the flowchart. Node 4 followed at noon. Summit Bridge Capital Forensic Audit Demand Formal Letter, citing fraudulent POA and unauthorized collateral pledge. Francis had loved Christmas. 53 years of decorations and traditions and family dinners. This year it was cold pizza and insurance fraud paperwork. Sterling hadn't called, hadn't texted. He was in Aspen with a wife who'd divorced him 3 days ago and he didn't know it yet. I worked through the afternoon mechanical, executing each node like the pressure relief systems I'd designed for 40 years. Check dependencies, verify sequence, document completion. At 7:12 p.m. my phone buzzed with an American Express push notification. I opened it. Supplementary card ending 4728, declined insufficient authorization. Merchant element 47, Aspen, Colorado. Transaction amount $487.52. Element 47, 5-star Aspen restaurant. Christmas dinner. I'd revoked Sterling and Catalina's authorized user status. Monday morning cardholders absolute right, no notice required. The change had processed through American Express systems within 24 hours. Their supplementary cards were dead metal. Card declined mid-Christmas dinner at Aspen Fine Dining. I didn't need to be there to see it. The waiter returning to their table, black metal card face down on the check tray. The apology, the silence. Sterling pulling out his personal card to cover the bill. Catalina watching him fumble for his wallet. Merry Christmas, Sterling. I set the phone down and looked at the empty chair across the kitchen table. Frances's chair, the one she'd sat in for 31 years of breakfasts, 41 years of anniversary dinners, 53 years of Christmas mornings. I poured coffee cold from the pot I'd made at noon and lifted the mug toward the empty chair. Merry Christmas, Frances, I said to the silence. 54 Christmases we had together. This one I spent filing insurance fraud complaints and declining Sterling's credit card in Aspen. You'd tell me I'm doing the right thing, or you'd tell me I've become something you wouldn't recognize. I'm not sure which. The house was silent. No music, no laughter, no Catalina and Sterling arriving with Ivy for dinner. No Marlene who'd offered to host me and I'd declined because I needed to work. Just me and the engineering journal and Francis's empty chair. Outside, snow fell on Lakewood. The streetlights cast orange shadows across the kitchen wall. The refrigerator hummed. 300 miles away in Aspen, Sterling sat at Element 47 with a declined credit card and a wife who'd filed for divorce from an airplane 3 days ago. Both of them completely unaware that I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was orchestrating their public humiliation from the tactical perimeter of my empty kitchen. The coffee was cold, the house was silent, and I could reach them anywhere. The phone vibrated at 9:02 p.m. while I was rinsing my coffee mug at the kitchen sink. Sterling's name appeared on the screen. This would be the hardest note of the entire counteroffensive, I answered. Dad. Sterling's voice wasn't angry or accusatory. It was shaking, confused. Something's wrong with the credit cards. The bank app won't load. Catalina's been on the phone with American Express for 40 minutes, and they keep saying the accounts are restricted. Do you know anything about this? I closed my eyes. Behind me, Francis's empty chair sat in the darkness. Sterling, are you all right? I don't understand what's happening, he said. I could hear voices in the background, Catalina talking to someone, her tone sharp. The waiter said the card was declined. Catalina thinks it's fraud. Is it fraud? Dad, did someone steal our accounts? He was genuinely confused. Not playing games, not manipulating, actually unaware that I'd orchestrated it. I could tell him right now. Tell him Catalina filed for divorce from the airplane before it landed. Tell him about the APS case file. Tell him Vernon used Dalton Reed's $50,000 as operating capital. Tell him I froze the accounts and revoked the credit cards and filed insurance fraud complaints on Christmas morning. But if I told him Catalina would know, and she'd spend the flight home from Aspen purging evidence files, deleting emails, coordinating stories with Vernon, the tactical advantage would collapse. The flowchart demanded silence. Do you want to come home, Sterling? I asked. From Aspen, just come home. A long pause. Suffocating, I could hear him breathing. Are you angry with me about something? My throat tightened. I love you, Sterling. I have always loved you. Another pause. Longer. Dad, I don't. I disconnected the call. Stood at the sink in the darkness. Phone still in my hand. Coffee mug forgotten in soapy water. I just told him I loved him, and then hung up before he could ask more questions. Before I could break and tell him everything. Because the engineering flowchart doesn't allow for mercy. Because if I had told him everything Catalina would know, and she'd destroy evidence before they got back to Denver. I stood in the dark Lakewood kitchen at 9:11 p.m., holding the phone, and understood that telling Sterling, I love you, Sterling, I have always loved you, might be the most honest and most cruel thing I'd said in the entire 7-day counteroffensive. Honest because it was true. Cruel because I said it while withholding every other truth that mattered. The flowchart doesn't allow for mercy, but it extracts a cost. December 26th arrived cold and gray. I drove to 1670 Broadway before the office staff arrived, and found Clifford at his window with coffee and interesting expression on his face. Vernon and Sterling retained emergency counsel, he said without turning around. Victor Hale of Hale and Associates. Should I know that name? Clifford smiled the kind of smile that meant checkmate in 3 moves. He was my managing partner at Goldman and Cross. I fired him personally in 2013 for billing fraud, inflating hours, forging client timesheets. He runs a very predictable playbook, emergency, ex parte, petitions, creating time pressure, hoping respondents panic and settle before discovery. And the flaw is I sat in the room when he designed that playbook 15 years ago. I know every move he'll make before he makes it. I looked out the window at downtown Denver, waking up in the December cold. Victor Hale, Clifford's former partner, now opposing counsel. He'll file an emergency petition to freeze your assets. Clifford continued. Claim you're liquidating to hide them. He'll demand expedited hearing, 3-day notice. Try to get a temporary restraining order before we can respond. It's his signature move. What do we do? We already filed the counter motions yesterday, before he even got retained. By the time Hale figures out what playbook to run, will have executed the entire strategy he was planning to deploy against us. Node 1 completion had been the medical evaluation. I'd scheduled it for 3 p.m. at Denver Health Medical Center. Marlene drove me there through midday traffic. We arrived at the neurology department at 2:55. Dr. Simone Cross met us in the consultation room, a senior neurologist in her early 60s, with gray hair pulled back and the methodical demeanor of someone who'd administered thousands of cognitive assessments. Zero connections to either party. Zero financial incentive to falsify results. Exactly what Clifford had requested. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to administer 3 assessments," she said, setting manila folders on the desk. Montreal Cognitive Assessment, Mini Mental State Examination, and an Executive Function Battery. These are the clinical gold standards that Meridian Wellness should have used and didn't. She walked me through each test: memory recall, spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, clock drawing, word association, delayed recall. I answered every question, drew every diagram, completed every task. At 4:15, Dr. Cross looked up from the score sheet. 30 out of 30, she said. "Perfect." Clifford leaned forward. "Doctor, can you comment on the Meridian Wellness evaluation claiming cognitive decline?" Dr. Cross's expression hardened. "Meridian Wellness has no licensed neurologist on staff. Their assessment violated Basic Medical Practice Act standards. I'm prepared to sign an affidavit stating this evaluation contradicts their findings completely." She typed for 10 minutes, printed the affidavit, signed it with a notary seal. "Zero cognitive impairment," she said, handing the document to Clifford. "Perfect executive function. No indicators of dementia, confusion, or impaired decision-making capacity. Anyone claiming otherwise is committing medical fraud." By 4:30, Clifford was uploading a disciplinary complaint to the Colorado Medical Board against Meridian Wellness. Fraudulent capacity evaluation. No licensed neurologist on staff. Medical Practice Act, Section 12. 36(1), 17 violations. "They'll lose their license," Clifford said. At 5 p.m. I walked out of Denver Health Medical Center into falling snow, held the capacity affidavit in my hand. Thought about the flowchart. "What's left?" I asked Clifford. 2 nodes, he said. Eviction, execution, and emergency guardianship block. Then the 7 days are complete, and we control every asset, every document, and every legal pathway. 2 nodes, 2 days. And the cost of telling Sterling I loved him on Christmas night, and then hanging up before explaining why the credit card stopped working. I woke at 6 a.m. on December 27th and opened my engineering journal to the flowchart page. 7 boxes. 5 filled with check marks. 2 remained blank. Node 6, eviction execution, and Node 7, emergency guardianship block. 5 days into the 7-day counteroffensive. 2 nodes to complete before December 29th. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window watching dawn break over Lakewood. Nodes 1 through 5 complete. A PS case opened. Fidelity frozen. Summit Bridge locked. Dalton Reed testimony secured. Capacity evaluation perfect. 2 nodes remained. By December 29th, the flowchart would close and I'd control every variable. Or the mechanism would collapse and Sterling would control everything. Physics, pressure, sequence. My phone rang at 7:32 a.m. "Marlene, I'm at DIA short-term parking," she said before I could speak. "They just cleared gate B17. I told you not to go to the airport. And I told you I wanted to see their faces when they came home to discover what you built, while they were drinking champagne in Aspen." I heard car doors slamming in the background, the rumble of shuttle buses. Vernon's pacing on his phone, looking frantic. Catalina's walking 10 feet ahead of Sterling like he doesn't exist. Your son-in-law looks like a ghost who walked into the wrong house. I closed my eyes. Catalina walking 10 feet ahead. Visible proof of the divorce she'd filed from the airplane 3 days ago that Sterling still didn't know about. The marriage collapse exposed in airport body language. Vernon's wife Colleen is screaming at their teenage son about ski bags, Marlene continued. This family is imploding in real time. What else? They're at the escalator, now descending to baggage claim. Vernon's still on the phone. Catalina hasn't looked at Sterling once. He's carrying her bag, his bag ski equipment, like a porter for people who already left him. I listened to Marlene describe the Langley family, descending the DIA escalator, and felt the strange stillness of an engineer watching a poorly designed mechanism collapse under its own structural weight. You don't have to push it. You just have to remove the supporting pressure points and wait for physics to finish the work. Leave the airport, Marlene, I said. Drive to Clifford's office. Don't let them see you. Already walking to my car. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, thinking about Catalina, walking 10 feet ahead of Sterling through Denver International Airport. The divorce filing she'd executed at 35,000 feet. The champagne photo at St. Regis. The Element 47 credit card decline. The mechanism was failing. All I'd done was remove the structural supports. I arrived at 1670 Broadway at 10 a.m. Marlene was already there, coffee in hand, watching Clifford work at his computer. Colorado Secretary of State portal, Clifford said without looking up. Harrington Engineering, LLC, registered December 23rd, 9:47 a.m. Articles of organization filed. Registered agent this office. Corporate purpose, commercial property acquisition and asset management. 100% ownership from shop sale proceeds, I asked. 100%. Your company. Your capital. Ready for deployment. Marlene looked between us. Deployment for what? Clifford pulled up a document on his screen. Harrington Engineering, LLC, purchased assignment of contract rights from Westside Property Solutions on December 24th. $50,000. Assignment of what contract? Marlene asked. The purchase contract for Gordon's Lakewood home, Clifford said. Westside held the buyer position from Langley Realty. Harrington Engineering, LLC, is now the buyer of record. Marlene's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Wait, you bought the purchase contract for your own stolen house. I inserted my corporation into their paper chain, I said. Turned asset liquidation into absolute liability. It sounds counterintuitive, Clifford added, but by inserting your LLC as the buyer of record, you don't just stop the sale, you create a contractual breach that triggers double damage penalties under Colorado Commercial Code. Instead of defending you, become the plaintiff pursuing damages. Clifford stood and moved to the whiteboard, drew boxes and arrows like I'd done with the flowchart. Langley Realty contracted to sell property to Westside Property Solutions. Westside assigned contract rights to Cole Engineering for $50,000, same amount Dalton Reed lost. Cole Engineering is now buyer of record, but Langley Realty is in material breach under Colorado commercial law because they contracted to sell property with zero title authority. Civil exposure, Marlene asked. $220,000 under the double damages non-performance clause, Clifford said. Vernon doesn't just lose the deal. He owes Gordon $250,000. I watched Clifford draw the mechanism on the whiteboard. Boxes connected by arrows. Dependencies cascading. Pressure relief valves opening in sequence. They tried to sell my house to fund Vernon's pinnacle lawsuit settlement, I said. Now the sale itself creates liability that exceeds what they were trying to steal. Marlene laughed sharp and bitter. You weaponize their own fraud. I just removed the supporting pressure points, I said. Physics did the rest. Clifford was explaining the Colorado Commercial Code provisions to Marlene when my phone buzzed at 11:58. Unlisted number, I answered. Catalina's voice cut through like frozen wire. No greeting, no preamble. We need a settlement meeting. Today, my attorney's office, 2 p.m. You, your counsel, and anyone else you think can help you understand how badly you've miscalculated. Hello, Catalina. 2 p.m. Hale and Associates, 16th floor, 1625 Broadway. If you're not there, we file emergency motions tomorrow morning and you lose everything you think you've protected. Don't make me explain this twice. The line went dead. I set the phone down. Clifford and Marlene were both watching me. Catalina, I said. Settlement meeting at 2 p.m. Victor Hale's office. She says if we don't show, they file emergency motions tomorrow. Clifford checked his watch. 2 hours. She's pressuring for immediate response before we can prepare. It's Hale's playbook, I said. Emergency petition time pressure force settlement before discovery. Except we've had 7 days to build the counter-architecture, Clifford said, and she has no idea what we've deployed. Marlene looked at the whiteboard with its boxes and arrows. So we go to the settlement meeting. I thought about Catalina walking through DIA 10 feet ahead of Sterling, the divorce she'd filed from an airplane, the Cole Engineering contract assignment creating $220,000 in liability, the 7-day flowchart with 2 nodes remaining. We go, I said, but not to settle. I didn't go to the 2 p.m. settlement meeting at Victor Hale's office. Instead, I stood on my own porch at 1:04 p.m., watching the black Escalade arrive and Catalina step onto my frost-covered lawn, carrying a leather folder full of papers that no longer mattered because I'd already dismantled everything they represented. Clifford stood to my left, Marlene to my right. The December cold made our breath visible as steam. The Escalade idled at the curb. Catalina exited first, flanked by Vernon and Colleen Langley. She wore a charcoal suit and carried the leather folder like it was a briefcase full of authority. Vernon looked agitated, phone in hand. Colleen kept glancing at the neighbors' houses like she was worried about witnesses. Catalina approached the porch with calculated confidence, stopped at the bottom step. "Gordon, we can do this reasonably," she said, projecting authority across frost-white grass. "We have an emergency court appointment scheduled for medical transition protocols. If you cooperate, this doesn't have to become adversarial." "You're standing on my lawn uninvited," I said. "You didn't go to the settlement meeting you demanded. Which one of us is being adversarial?" "I came here personally to offer you dignity," Catalina said. "Don't make me regret professional courtesy." I reached behind me and opened the front door wide. The interior revealed itself. Marlene had spent the morning arranging evidence stacks on every horizontal surface. File boxes labeled by fraud category. Timeline poster board mounted on the living room wall showing the conspiracy sequence. Bank statements. Insurance policy pages. Court filings. 7 days of documentation organized like an engineering failure analysis. Catalina's eyes flickered. Vernon's confidence wavered. "You wanted to discuss medical transition protocols," I said. "Let me show you what I've been working on instead." "What is this?" Catalina asked. Marlene stepped into view from inside. 7 days of documentation. Adult Protective Services case file. APS-2024-Denver-4471. Would you like to see your section? It's the largest. I stepped to the edge of the porch, looked down at Catalina standing on the lawn below me. $1.8 million bridge loan using forged power of attorney, I said. $3.5 million life insurance policy you changed to yourself as beneficiary 48 hours after my business sale cleared. Fraudulent conservatorship petition claiming I'm incapacitated. My Lakewood home listed without authority. $50,000 stolen from Dalton Reed, who just wanted to buy a house for his family. Catalina opened her mouth to speak. I kept going. Fidelity accounts frozen under Colorado Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act. Summit Bridge Capital Loan, locked pending fraud investigation. Dr. Simone Cross's perfect cognitive evaluation, 30 out of 30, destroying the incapacity narrative. Colorado Medical Board complaint filed against Meridian Wellness for operating without licensed neurologist. Vernon's phone had stopped ringing. He was listening now. "And my personal favorite," I said. "Dissolution of marriage petition filed December 22nd at 7:23 a.m. from United Airlines in-flight Wi-Fi. 43 minutes after Sterling sent me the exclusion text. You divorced him from the airplane before it landed in Aspen. Does he know yet?" I watched Catalina's face as I said it. Watched the exact moment her professional condescension evaporated, and she understood that I knew everything, had documented everything, and was standing on my own porch delivering the evidence list, like an engineering failure analysis report, while she stood on frost-covered lawn holding papers that no longer carried any authority. "You don't understand what you're—" she started. "I understand perfectly," I said. "You're standing on my lawn holding a folder full of papers that don't matter anymore because every asset you tried to steal is frozen. Every fraud you committed is documented, and Adult Protective Services is building a felony case with your name at the top." Silence. Just December wind and distant traffic. Vernon stepped forward. "You smug son of a—" Clifford moved to block the porch steps. "Every word of this conversation is being transcribed and will be delivered to the Financial Crimes Unit before 5 p.m. today. Keep talking if you'd like to add threatening language to your exposure." Colleen grabbed Vernon's arm and pulled him backward. "Get in the car! Now!" Catalina stared at me in silence for 10 seconds. Then she turned without speaking and walked to the idling Escalade. Vernon and Colleen followed. The SUV pulled away. Clifford was on the phone before it cleared the driveway. "Owen Fletcher, Clifford Mercer. I need you at my office in 90 minutes. Gordon has definitive recording evidence you'll want to hear immediately." At 3 p.m. we arrived at 1670 Broadway. Owen Fletcher was waiting in the conference room. Clifford connected my iPad to the media display and pressed play. Ivy's voice filled the room, first singing, off-key and joyful. Jingle bells, jingle all the way, my 9-year-old granddaughter. The iPad I'd given her for educational games, registered to my account stored on the family cloud partition I co-owned. Then the background shifted. Adult voices became clear. Catalina, signing the conservatorship papers at Denver County is the final asset lock. The old man won't understand the legal filings before we get back from Aspen. Sterling, Vernon needs the cash wire cleared before January 1st, or Pinnacle takes the whole brokerage. We're cutting this close. Catalina, we're fine. He's confused, isolated, and by the time he figures out what happened, we'll have medical documentation declaring him incompetent to challenge anything. Ivy's singing continued in the background. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Owen Fletcher stopped taking notes and just listened. The recording ran for 4 minutes. Conspiracy discussion, asset timelines, Vernon's Pinnacle deadline, conservatorship strategy, all captured while my granddaughter sang Christmas carols, completely unaware her iPad was recording her parents planning to steal her grandfather's life. When it ended, Fletcher looked at me. This recording was generated on your granddaughter's iPad. Device registered to me, I said. Stored on family cloud partition I co-own. Colorado privacy law compliance. This is direct audio evidence of conspiracy to commit grand larceny and elder exploitation, Fletcher said. I'm hand-delivering this to DA Financial Crimes within the hour. One request, I said. My granddaughter's name, Ivy, needs to be completely redacted from any public docket. She's 9 years old. She was singing a Christmas carol. She doesn't deserve her name in court records attached to her parents' criminal prosecution. Fletcher nodded. Agreed. Victim minor redaction is standard protocol. The recording will be logged as device registered Gordon Harrington. No child identification. At 4:17 p.m., I exited the state building into Denver twilight. Marlene walked beside me. You haven't checked the flowchart once since they left your lawn. I don't need to, I said. It's finished. The 7-day counteroffensive was complete. Owen Fletcher had hand-delivered Ivy's iPad recording to DA Financial Crimes. The mechanism had finished itself. But Clifford was still at his desk at 5:03 p.m., monitoring the Denver County Court electronic docket, with the expression of a general watching an opponent march confidently into a blocked canyon. Victor filed his emergency ex parte petition at 4:47, he said without looking away from the screen. Alleges sudden, erratic financial behavior. Rapid capital liquidation claims you're dissipating assets in confusion. It's exactly the protocol I mapped for him on Monday, his only remaining move. Will it work? I asked. Colorado Section 1514.4, 03 requires 14-day standard hearing minimum. Emergency orders cannot issue without independent medical board verification. Clifford smiled. I uploaded our response bundle at 4:24:23 minutes before he filed. Dr. Cross, capacity, affidavit, meridian fraud, complaint. Live APS case file, real-time fidelity. Transaction logs proving zero dissipation. When Victor opens his workstation tomorrow morning, he'll find my response waiting like a spring-loaded trap. I watched Clifford work for another 20 minutes. Then I pulled out my phone and composed a text message to Sterling. Meet me Blue Star Coffee South Pearl at 8. Come alone. I sent it. 3 minutes later, read receipt. No reply. You're meeting him? Clifford asked. I have to, I said. Before the indictments. Before he's represented by counsel who'll tell him not to speak to me, while he's still my son-in-law and not just a defendant. What will you say? That I love him. And that love doesn't mean I'll dismantle justice to save him from his choices. I left Clifford's office at 6:30 and drove through Denver streets. Already dark with December evening. Stopped at a copy shop on Colfax. Printed one document. Folded it into my jacket pocket. Blue Star Coffee on South Pearl Street was quiet when I arrived at 7:45. I ordered black coffee and sat at a table near the back. Watched the door. Sterling entered at 8 p.m. exactly. He looked 10 years older than he had 7 days ago. Shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Eyes bloodshot. He'd never been punctual in his life unless driven by terror. He sat across from me without speaking. I pulled the folded document from my jacket and slid it across the table. Catalina's dissolution of marriage petition. Denver County Court stamp clearly visible. Filing time stamp, December 22nd, 2024, 7:23 a.m. Sterling stared at it, didn't touch it. When did you... His voice broke. How long have you... Since Monday afternoon, I said. 4 days. She filed this from the airplane before it landed in Aspen. You were sitting next to her ordering champagne 90 minutes later. He dropped his head into his hands. Oh, God. I sat across the Blue Star coffee table from Sterling at 8:07 p.m. and watched his face collapse as he understood that his wife had legally divorced him from 35,000 feet while he sat beside her ordering champagne, and I'd known about it for 4 days without telling him. Silence. Just the espresso machine hissing in distant conversation from other tables. I spoke softly, without heat. You used the date your mother died as the password to the laptop where you kept every record of what you were doing to me. I said, March 14th, 2022. The day Frances died. You weaponized her death date. Sterling whispered, I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. But apology isn't an alternative to consequences. You're facing criminal indictment. I no longer have the power to halt that process. Catalina said it was just a bridge loan, Sterling said, his voice raw. She said you'd never find out. She said, I'm a systems engineer, Sterling. I read schematics. I always have. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who'd just discovered everything he'd built was constructed on sand. What happens now? He asked. The DA files charges. A PS completes their investigation. You and Catalina face prosecution. Vernon faces prosecution. The legal machinery runs its course. And us, you and me? I reached across the table and touched his forearm. I love you, son, I said with aching gentleness. That asset remains unchanged. But love doesn't mean I'll dismantle the architecture of justice to save you from your choices. Sterling nodded. He couldn't speak. Take care of Ivy, I said. Whatever happens to you and Catalina, that little girl deserves better than what you've given her so far. I stood, left cash on the table for the coffee, walked out. Sterling remained at the table, head in his hands. At 9:15, I called Clifford from my vehicle parked outside the coffee shop. I need to execute a final instrument tonight, I said, before tomorrow. I'm still at my desk, Clifford said. Come in. I arrived at 1670 Broadway at 10 p.m. Clifford had the document already prepared. He'd known what I wanted before I asked. Irrevocable Education Trust for Ivy Rose Harrington. $380,000 from the shop sale proceeds. Private education funding through graduate school. Trustee Clifford Mercer. Disbursements restricted to tuition books and housing only. Unreachable by parents. Unreachable by creditors. Protected. I signed it with the exact stroke and weight that had been missing from the forged documents Sterling had created. Lines authentic. Clean. Entirely mine. Clifford watched me sign. This is the instrument she'll fully appreciate when she's a woman, when she understands what you protected for her while her parents were trying to steal everything. This is the asset allocation Frances expected of me, I said. Ivy gets an education no matter what happens to her parents. $380,000. Irrevocable. Unreachable by anyone except the trustee for her tuition and housing. Clean lines. Authentic signature. Mine. Clifford sealed the document with a notary stamp and filed it electronically. Timestamp. December 27th, 2024, 10:43 p.m. I left his office at 11 and drove through quiet Lakewood streets. My engineering journal sat on the passenger seat, open to the flowchart page. 6 boxes filled with check marks documenting the completed nodes. 1 box remaining blank. Node 7 would execute tomorrow morning. The final instrument, the last pressure point. But tonight, driving through empty streets at 11:18 p.m., I thought about Sterling sitting alone at Blue Star Coffee, staring at Catalina's airplane divorce petition. About Ivy's education trust filed and sealed. About Frances's empty chair in my kitchen. The 7-day counteroffensive was complete. But the cost was counted in family, not dollars. I woke at 6 a.m. on December 28th, exactly 7 days after the phone call that started everything. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window wearing Frances's cardigan sweater, watching dawn break over Lakewood. The engineering journal lay open on the table. 7 boxes drawn in neat rows. 6 filled with check marks. 1 remained empty. I sat down and picked up my pen. December 28th. 7 days since I discovered Sterling using Frances's death date as a password. 6 boxes checked. 1 remains. I placed a single checkmark in the seventh box. Node 7 eviction execution. The system is complete. Engineering discipline plans are completed before execution, not after. I marked the final node at 6:03 a.m., knowing it would execute in 3 hours, when a commercial locksmith rekeyed the Cherry Creek house at 2847 Vine Street. Frances's sweater still smelled like her perfume, even though she'd died 4 years ago. I'd worn this the morning of her funeral. I was wearing it the morning I evicted Sterling from the house we'd built together. The flowchart was complete. The mechanism would close at 9 a.m. I arrived at 2847 Vine Street at 8:55. Clifford was already there, standing on the curb in the December cold. A white pickup truck pulled up at 9 a.m. exactly. The driver stepped out, property manager Tom Elliott, mid-40s, carrying a clipboard and a leather tool bag. "Mr. Harrington, Mr. Mercer," he said, shaking our hands. "Locksmith is ready. Under Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 15, 16, 207, and 13, 4104. The occupancy termination notice expired at midnight, January 2nd. We're within legal parameters for cylinder replacement. Proceed," Clifford said. "Mr. Cole and I are here as statutory witnesses." I looked at the house, the one Frances and I had bought in 1989, 35 years ago. The porch where I had held 3-month-old Ivy and toasted her future. The door Frances had picked the paint color for. "This is the house my wife and I bought 35 years ago," I said to no one in particular. "I held my granddaughter on that porch when she was 3 months old. Now I'm changing the locks to keep her father out." The locksmith, a young man with tool belt and drill case, approached the front entrance and began work on the cylinder. The drill whined. Metal shavings fell onto the welcome mat Frances had chosen at Target in 2018. I stood on the Cherry Creek lawn at 9:17 a.m., watching a commercial locksmith drill out the entrance cylinders of the house I'd owned for 35 years. The house where Frances picked the door color, where I had carried Sterling as an infant after bringing him home from the hospital, where I'd held Ivy and toasted her future, and understood that eviction wasn't just changing locks. It was surgically removing my son from the physical architecture of family memory. The locksmith finished the front entrance at 9:32, moved to the rear entrance, then the garage. Tom affixed a laminated notice to the front door glass with industrial adhesive. "Property held exclusively under Gordon Wesley Harrington. Revocable trust, residential occupancy. Terminated by order of grantor. All correspondence to Clifford Mercer, ESQ. 1670 Broadway, Denver Co. 80202. Notice is legally compliant," Tom said. "Clear statement of trust, ownership, occupancy termination, and correspondence address. If occupants attempt entry, it's criminal trespass. Sterling and Catalina are currently staying at an extended stay hotel near DIA," Clifford said. "They received notification via certified mail and email. No claim of insufficient notice is possible." I stared at the notice. 35 years. Frances picked the paint color for that door. Now it had a legal notice saying Sterling couldn't enter. At 9:45, Tom handed me a set of new brass keys. "Complete key set," he said. "Front entrance, rear entrance garage. New cylinders, new cuts. Previous keys are permanently invalidated." I held the new brass keys in my palm. Front entrance, rear entrance garage, my house permanently secured against Sterling. "The system is operating under correct specifications," I said. Clifford looked at me. "That's it. 7 days of legal architecture, and the final node closes with an engineering quality control phrase." "That's exactly what this was," I said. "Quality control." The system had a catastrophic failure. I identified the fault, isolated the damaged components, and restored operational integrity. Now the specifications are correct. We drove to 1670 Broadway at 11 a.m. Halfway there, Clifford's phone buzzed with an email notification. He glanced at the dashboard screen. "Pinnacle Capital Partners," he said. He pulled over and opened the email on his phone, read it aloud. "Pinnacle Capital Partners filed emergency ex parte motion for immediate asset attachment against Langley Realty Group at 9:47 this morning. Motion granted at 10:15. Every commercial credit line frozen by judicial order. Langley Realty Denver filed emergency liquidation bankruptcy at 10:52. Vernon's entire empire collapsed in 4 hours," I said. "Correct." Clifford said. Pinnacle learned his plan to use your fraudulently accessed accounts was under state investigation. They refused to wait for the January 1st deadline. They seized everything this morning. We arrived at Clifford's office at 11:20. Marlene was already there, reviewing subpoenaed email chains on Clifford's computer. You need to see this, she said when we walked in. Clifford pulled up the email thread. Vernon to Catalina, timestamp 10:14 a.m. this morning. Your strategy completely collapsed. I'm losing my entire brokerage because you swore the old man was too senile to notice the transfers. Pinnacle just froze everything. You destroyed my life. Marlene looked at me. He's blaming his own daughter for the failure of his fraud. Not for the fraud itself, for failing at it. The mechanism failed under load, I said, and now the components are blaming each other for structural inadequacy. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing documentation, a PS investigation status, DA referral timeline, Fidelity account restoration schedule, Summit Bridge capital fraud complaint response. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang, Marlene's number. I looked up. She was standing 10 feet away, holding her phone, looking at me. She spoke 3 words into her phone that I heard both through the device and across the room. It is finished. I returned to my Lakewood kitchen at 1:08 p.m. The 7-day counteroffensive was complete. Marlene had spoken 3 words. It is finished. But I sat alone at my kitchen table waiting for confirmation I knew was coming. I brewed coffee, let it go cold, stared at Francis's empty chair across from me. The refrigerator made the same mechanical hum it had made 7 days ago when Sterling's text arrived. 168 hours from discovery to resolution. The flowchart journal sat closed on the counter, all 7 boxes checked. Francis used to sit in that chair for 53 years. Now it was empty, and I was drinking cold coffee, waiting to hear that Sterling had been arrested for trying to steal my life. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. Marlene's name. I answered. It is finished, she said. Her voice carried the absolute stillness of someone who had just watched a structure hit Earth. I closed my eyes. 7 days of tension released from my shoulders. Tell me, I said after a long pause. I'm sitting in my car 2 blocks from 2847 Vine Street, Marlene said. I just watched them take Sterling into custody. Denver PD Economic Crimes Detectives. Owen Fletcher from APS. Felony arrest warrants. Gordon, it's done. I set my coffee mug down. The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator hum. Details, I said. 2 Denver PD Economic Crimes Detectives, plus Owen Fletcher, Marlene said. Warrants from the DA for grand larceny forgery conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. Colorado statutes 184401 and 185102. I listened to my sister describe the mechanics of justice. Sterling opened the door at 2:03. She continued, stared at the badges for several seconds. No surprise on his face, Gordon. He looked like a man who'd finally arrived at a destination he'd been traveling toward for months. They placed him in custody right there on the porch. I stood in my Lakewood kitchen holding the phone and understood that maybe Sterling had wanted this to end, had wanted someone to stop him before he traveled any further into the moral wilderness Catalina had mapped for him. And Catalina, I asked? Taken into custody 15 minutes later, Marlene said. Commercial parking structure near Park Meadows. She was in Colleen's sedan attempting to clear the area. Vernon was arrested simultaneously at the Langley Realty offices. Colleen and Rhett received material witness subpoenas. The system had cycled to completion, all the pressure points removed. The mechanism collapsed under its own structural weight, exactly as I'd calculated. There's something else, Marlene said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Gordon, Ivy is at Colleen's house with a nanny. A PS is executing a temporary protective placement order. They're removing her from guardian custody pending the criminal proceedings. I was already moving toward the door. Where are they taking her? APS supervised handoff, 4 p.m. Aurora residential address. I'm texting you the location now. I'm leaving now, I said. I grabbed my keys, looked at the empty kitchen chair one last time. 7 days. From December 22nd to December 28th. From discovery to resolution. I slid the zipper on Francis's cardigan sweater and walked out into the December cold. I arrived at the Aurora residential parking lot at 4 p.m. exactly. Snow had started falling again, light flakes catching in the streetlights that were just beginning to glow in the late afternoon. An APS caseworker led Ivy out from a state vehicle. 9 years old, red winter jacket, clutching the stuffed doll I'd bought her last summer at the Denver Zoo. Her eyes were wide with confusion about the state vehicles and the strange adults and why Mommy wasn't here. Then she spotted my car. She broke into a run across the parking lot, her small boots crunching on thin snow. I dropped to one knee on the cold asphalt to her height and opened my arms. "Grandpa's here, Ivy," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She crashed into me, buried her face in my shoulder. Her small body shook. "Grandpa, where's Mommy?" she asked, her voice muffled against Francis's sweater. "The lady said Mommy had to go somewhere, and I have to stay with you now." "You're staying with me for a while, sweetheart," I said, holding her close against the December cold. "Everything is going to be okay. Grandpa promises." She didn't speak, just held on. I closed my eyes and thought about the $380,000 in irrevocable trust I'd signed last night at Clifford's office. This child permanently insulated from the financial instability her parents had created. Whatever happened to Sterling and Catalina Ivy's future was secured. Francis would have expected nothing less. Ivy's small voice came against my shoulder, barely audible. "Your sweater smells nice, Grandpa. It looks like the one Grandma was knitting in the old photo album you showed me last summer." I held her closer. The first smile in 7 days softened my face. "It was her, sweetheart," I said. "She finished it a long time ago." "I miss Grandma," Ivy whispered. "I miss her too," I said. I stood lifting Ivy in my arms. She was getting so big. 9 years old now. The last time I'd held her like this, she'd been 5. I carried her to my car, buckled her into the back seat with the stuffed doll, drove west toward Lakewood through December twilight. She chattered beside me about the doll and whether I had the stuffed animals she'd left in the spare bedroom last summer, and what we were having for dinner. The house that had felt too vast and empty this morning would have a 9-year-old's voice filling it tonight. But as I pulled into my driveway with Ivy still talking, I knew one final action remained before the 7-day counteroffensive architecture truly closed. I had to decide what to tell her about why her parents weren't coming home. I sat alone in my Lakewood kitchen at 6 a.m. on December 28th, before the warrants, before the evictions, before everything closed, listening to Ivy breathe in the adjacent bedroom and drawing Francis's note from my breast pocket one final time. The paper had been folded there for 6 days while I dismantled the conspiracy she'd warned me about before dying. I'd carried it through every node of the counteroffensive, every meeting, every confrontation, every strategic calculation. I unfolded it and read her handwriting aloud to the empty chair where she used to sit. "I watched Catalina look at you like a bank account from the wedding day. You didn't see it because you refused to look. Don't let love for Sterling blind you to the truth. I love you. F." I set the note down on the table and stared at Francis's empty chair. "Francis," I said to the silence. "My eyes are wide open. 7 days. I saw everything. The password was your death date. The life insurance valued me at $3.5 million dead. Sterling used the date you died to encrypt the accounts he used to rob me. She'd known. 4 years ago, dying of pancreatic cancer, she'd seen what I'd refused to see. And she'd left me this note like an engineering specification. Here is the fault in the system. Here is where failure will occur. Do not ignore the data." I folded the note along its original creases with engineering precision, placed it in a fresh archival envelope, sealed it shut, not to banish it, to protect the data. This note was evidence of her final engineering assessment. She'd identified the system fault before I saw it. The least I could do was preserve her analysis in archival conditions. My engineering journal lay open beside me, all 7 boxes checked. A PS case opened, fidelity frozen, summit locked, read testimony secured, capacity evaluation perfect, eviction executed, emergency guardianship blocked. The architecture was complete. Before the sun hit the horizon today, the warrants would be served, the mechanism would finish cycling, and Francis' prediction would prove accurate down to the last variable. At 2:55 p.m., after the warrants, after Ivy's arrival, I stepped onto my front porch with fresh coffee. Inside, Marlene helped Ivy assemble Lego, their voices drifting through the storm door. I stood on the wood planks looking at the street. My mind was free of the next calculation for the first time in 7 days. "You coming inside?" Marlene called through the door. "Ivy wants Grandpa to check the gear alignment on her Lego helicopter." "Give me 1 minute," I said without turning. I stood on my Lakewood porch at 3:06 p. Immediate December 28th, with hot coffee warming my hands, and looked east toward Cherry Creek, where 6 days ago black Escalades had torn through snow under Langley family vanity tags. The street was completely level now, silent, undisturbed. No conspiracy vehicles, no threat vectors, just a quiet residential neighborhood where a grandfather could stand on his own porch in December peace, while his granddaughter's laughter echoed from inside the house. For the first time in 7 days, I wasn't calculating the next move, anticipating the next threat, engineering the next countermeasure. The flowchart was closed. The system was stable. I could just stand here. I took a slow sip of hot coffee and looked down the asphalt toward the eastern horizon, spoke softly into the freezing Colorado air. "You didn't leave me behind on Christmas vacation, Sterling," I said to the empty street. "You and the greed of your wife's family systematically cut yourselves out of my life, and out of every single dollar of the estate that would have been your lawful inheritance. Merry Christmas, son." I turned and stepped over the threshold. The heavy oak door clicked shut seal tight. From inside the warm house, Ivy's laughter echoed off brick walls. On December 30th, I sat in Clifford's office for the first time since the filings had closed. He ran through the legal dispositions with the methodical precision of an engineer documenting system outcomes. "Sterling accepted plea agreement," Clifford said. 3 years suspended sentence, 5 years supervised probation. In exchange, he provided certified testimony against Vernon Langley and Victor Hale before federal grand jury. I nodded. Sterling had chosen cooperation over loyalty. Vernon sentenced 7 years state corrections for grand fraud and RICO conspiracy. Clifford continued. Langley Realty completely liquidated and dissolved. Catalina received 2 years state facility. Colorado real estate license permanently revoked by regulatory board. Victor Hale formally disbarred by Colorado Supreme Court. Meridian Wellness medical license permanently revoked. 2 officers facing criminal indictments. Systematic accounting. Every outcome documented. Ivy is residing with her maternal grandmother, Colleen. Clifford said, spending every weekend at your Lakewood home. The trust is fully operational. First disbursement was used last week to enroll her in classical violin instruction. $380,000 protecting a 9-year-old's future while her parents face the consequences of trying to steal mine. Clifford slid a heavy linen envelope across the mahogany desk. "This arrived from Sterling's probation officer," he said. "Personal correspondence. He requested it be delivered through official channels." I looked at the envelope. Sterling's handwriting. Sealed. I left it that way. Slid it into my jacket pocket, the same pocket that had held Francis's note. "I'll review it later," I said, "when the system is ready." Clifford shook my hand, stayed silent. He understood the engineering of grief too well for empty platitudes. "You did what Francis would have expected," he finally said. "You protected the integrity of the architecture." "She left me the specifications," I said. "I just followed the engineering." I walked out into the late December morning carrying 2 pieces of paper. One from a woman I loved who passed into darkness 4 years ago, warning me about the conspiracy. One from a son I still loved, whose trajectory I was still evaluating. Francis's cardigan rested at home waiting for next winter's arrival. The system was operating under correct specifications. And for the first time in 7 days, maybe the first time in 4 years, I was at peace. And to you listening to my story, remember this family betrayal cuts deepest because it comes from those you trusted most. I made the mistake of ignoring the warning signs. Frances saw it years before I did. She watched Catalina look at me like a bank account from the wedding day. But I refused to believe my own daughter-in-law could orchestrate something so calculated. I thought love would be enough. It wasn't. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if it's family. Here's what 7 days taught me sometimes. A dad's love means choosing justice over mercy when family betrays trust. This wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, it was protection. A dad's revenge against family who conspired to steal his life isn't about anger, it's about standing firm. I believe God allowed this trial to show me that engineering precision applies to defending what's right. Protecting Ivy's future meant making choices that broke my heart. But family shouldn't mean accepting betrayal. It should mean protecting the innocent like my granddaughter from those who weaponize love for profit. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment below. What would you have done in my position? Would a dad seeking revenge against family ever be justified in your eyes? Please share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already subscribed to Dad's Sweet Revenge for more stories about standing up when those closest to you break your trust. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time is valuable, and I don't take it for granted. Final reminder, this story contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. The lesson choosing truth over comfort is what I hope you carry forward.